Hi everybody, I hope you can hear me. Welcome back, Left Foot Live. We're back. It's been a while, hasn't it? And it's been a while because I've had so much else on, and I've got a young family. For those who are maybe new here, I've got 5 kids, and so I'm doing my best to keep the population of my local town ticking over. But with 5 kids, and I want to be a good dad, and full-on work schedule and everything else, you often have to prioritise. And so I had to prioritise a few things. Then the whole COVID debacle sort of threw things into disarray. And so it's been a while since we've done one of these Left Foot Lives. But what I've decided is, okay, let's get back into the game. I know a lot of you have had some really kind messages from people and comments that keep appearing saying, where are you? Are you still there? Yeah, I'm still here. And so I thought, okay, we've got to get back into this, return the goodwill, and do it in a manageable way. So the plan is that going forward, these Left Foot Lives will aim to do one of these every single month. So the first Friday of every month. And now wherever you're watching, it might not be Friday, it might still be Thursday, but the first Friday / Thursday night of the month. Each month we'll be doing one of these, and if we can start to get a few more into the mix, then great. Let's do that. So it's just at the moment it's a matter of prioritising and trying to get everything in order. But I also really love, I love having a conversation about movies and TV and perhaps the deeper truths and realities that these mythologies can speak to, the artistic merits or lack thereof of different stuff. And I really love this community, this audience on this channel who have subscribed over the years, and so I can't leave you. I can't leave you in the lurch. It's not right. So we're back. All right. So we've got a few things to talk about today, but before I get into the conversation and there's actually lots I want to talk about today. So the plan is with these Left Foot Lives is they're going to be focused on like movies and TV related stuff and artistic stuff. So one of the things I'm going to do each month is I'm going to have a record of the month that I recommend. And I've suddenly just realized as I've said that the record I want to recommend to you, I completely forgot to bring into the studio here, and it's still sitting on the record shelf out in the lounge. So that was a really good start. I had a mad panic as I was getting ready for the show, and I was thinking, yeah, great, we're going live. The intro music has started, the countdown music, and then I realized, I haven't got my earbuds in. So it's a mad dash to find them and get that all plugged in. But no matter, we're here, we're working, and we're all good to go. Let me just turn this up so I can hear myself a bit better. So what I want to talk about today, we've got lots to cover, movies, TV-related stuff. I want to talk about a couple of recent TV series, share my thoughts on those, whether I recommend them or not. The new Kenobi trailer. I know I'm a bit late to this party, but as I said, priorities and everything else, I haven't been online. So I wanted to talk about the book of Boba Fett, share my thoughts on that. And of course, the big topic, I guess, is the Batman. A couple of people have asked me, what did you think of the Snyder cut of the Justice League? I want to talk about that as well today. The Batman, what do I think about it? Is it overhyped? The hype that it's received from some quarters, and more. So we'll just get into it and we'll sort of see how it rolls. Before I do that, though, just another couple of quick updates and reminders, a few announcements before we get into tonight's viewing. I'd love to know how many people are interested. Let me know in the comments section. Because I've been thinking about a couple of things. One is one of my younger brothers, Tim, has now moved back to New Zealand from Canada with his wife and kids. He's an awesome dude. Him and I are very similar in the way we sort of see these things, and we have a deep appreciation and love for the cinematic arts. And so I'm desperately trying to convince him that he should make an appearance on some of these shows with me. And one of the things I was thinking about was maybe if we did some watch parties where we actually sat down, watched a movie, him and I live with you guys, and we just effectively did a running commentary on a film. So stuff like that. So let me know if you're interested in something like that, and we'll see if we can start scheduling a bit more of that sort of stuff as well. There's another show you'll notice appearing on this channel now regularly. It's a monthly show. It's called The Panel. It's part of another project that I've been involved with called Monday Night Live. And The Panel is focused on current affairs and sort of more cultural and political issues from a sort of conservative perspective. So not really so much in entertainment, movies and TV and stuff like that. And it's myself and a couple of other regular panelists who come on that show with me. So there's a guy called Simon O'Connor, who is a MP, a member of Parliament here in the New Zealand Parliament. He's a good friend of mine. So he's with the National Party, which is the opposition, the big opposition party here in New Zealand. We either have a Labour government or a National government. The National Party is currently in the opposition benches. So he's part of that. He's an electorate MP. And so he comes on the show. And another guy, Elliot O'Keefe, who's a good friend, who former head of the New Conservative Party, slurring my words already, and a social commentator who does his own stuff. So that's, if you see that popping up, that happens once a month as well now on this channel. And I think really that's, the Dispatches podcast. I've got a new podcast. Again, this is sort of focused on more cultural issues. It's been going for about, I think we're up to 60 or 70 episodes. I'm close to 100 if you count the patron-only episodes that I do, one of those every week. So if you're interested in podcasts, check out the Dispatches. My wife and I have got another one. If you're a Christian, you're married, you got kids, you're in a sort of family situation, that might be something to check out. It's called The Little Flock. We do that once a month. So it's been quite busy. One last thing before we jump into the topics of conversation. I know I've probably bored you already talking quite long and at length. Too much admin. Let's get into it. Okay, I will. But before we do that, just a huge thank you to everyone who's a patron of Left Foot Media. You guys are awesome. I am still on Patreon, patreon.com/Left Foot Media. There's a link in the video description for today. If you become a patron with $5 or more per month, then, and it's $5 New Zealand, so if you're overseas, it's even cheaper, then you get access to an exclusive patrons-only episode of the Dispatches podcast every single week, so that's a benefit. If you don't want to do that, that's totally cool. There's a PayPal link and a coffee link as well, if you just want to make a one-off contribution, and I think the Super Chats might be working as well. I'm not entirely sure if they're still working as they should. YouTube's been a bit funny lately, but yeah, if you want to support, that would be awesome, and a huge thank you to everyone who is supporting the channel. You guys are awesome. Okay, let's jump into it, and I want to start today, and I want to bring your comments into the show as well. So please keep those comments coming. I can see them popping in here, and I can do awesome things like this. Bring in your actual comments onto screen, and so I will do that. And let me just place this comment somewhere where it actually makes sense for it probably to be sitting, maybe up here somewhere. How's that? Can everyone see that comment? Here we go. So it's please chuck your comments in the comment section. I want to hear your feedback, and the idea is that these live streams are more of a dialogue and have a bit more of a communal feel. They're not quite as polished, shall we say, but hopefully you'll still enjoy them and still enjoy the conversation. Okay, so did everyone watch the new trailer for Kenobi? Because I did. It's funny because Kenobi is one of those shows, upcoming shows, where I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm getting older. I'm enjoying now things in a different state of life. So I'm enjoying even from 5 years ago. My eldest daughter is about to turn 15 tomorrow, and she is now a bit of a Marvel fanatic. She loves Marvel. And so I sit down with her and watch stuff with her now. My kids, my older kids, the twins, my boy, who is really starting to get into stuff. We often just, he'll come in early on a Saturday morning and say, right, Dad, can we watch a war movie that the girls don't want to watch? And so we lie there and watch, I don't know, some war movie. And then later on, Mum goes, what? You were watching what with him? Black Hawk what? Down? So I'm enjoying these things in a different way. And I'm normally sort of aware of what's going on, but I have to say Kenobi's one of those shows that sort of just almost slipped under the radar, a little bit. It's like, there's a new trailer out. So I went and watched the new trailer last night for Kenobi, and I don't know about you, but I watched it and I'm thinking there's only one real moment of substance that perhaps held any interest for me in this, and it was when he's talking to Owen, Uncle Owen, for those of us who are old enough to remember Uncle Owen. And Uncle Owen makes some comment about how he got Anakin killed. It's a really snide comment, about training him, and it's I don't know, it feels so weird. But it was the one thing that sort of held my interest in, like, oh, that's an interesting sort of moment of dramatic tension. But I was thinking, how can you actually really tell this story in a meaningful way about a guy who really, the backstory that you, thank you for that super chat, by the way, Kestra, the super chat is working, and I can see that. You're a legend. Thank you so much. Actually, let's have a look at this while we're here. So Castro said to me, could you do an in-depth review of the Lord of the Rings trilogy? Yes, I could, and I should get my brother in to do that, actually, because he's a lot more steeped in the literature lore of the Lord of the Rings than I am. And so it would be good, actually, him and I going through that in a bit more. Maybe that's a future show. I'll convince him. Come on. The people want to hear from you. But anyway, so, I was thinking about the Mandalorian, thinking about Kenobi. It's all just melding into one big, messy, bloomin' mush in my head now. Kenobi. And I was thinking, well, how do you tell that story about a guy who's literally, the whole backstory, the single point you're really focusing on is a guy who, this is the backstory point, remember, for this, that sort of this show is the background to this new show, is that his job was to basically sit quietly in the background and watch a young boy grow into manhood and just sort of quietly protect him in the background, and not, and like when we meet him in A New Hope, he's totally unknown to Luke. Do you know what I mean? It's not like they've been on previous adventures together and, oh, let's see those adventures on screen. It's a very strained, like so much butter spread far too thinly on bread. Where's that quote from? Someone tell me. And yeah, it's a bit of a thin story to start with, a premise. And then watching the trailer, I'm looking at it and I'm going, oh, I don't know. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what they actually do, but especially after the Book of Boba Fett, I'm not enthused. I will watch it. I'll watch it with my kids. I guess my younger kids will probably enjoy aspects of it, but I'm not. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, but I'm not. I'm not holding out much hope for this. I could be wrong, and I'm happy to be proved wrong, but yeah, I could be wrong. Which brings me to the Book of Boba Fett. The Book of Boba Fett. Again, let me know what your thoughts are on this. I'm late to this party because obviously the series is well and truly finished, but haven't had a chance until now to really talk about it. It's something I watched with my kids. We enjoyed sitting down each week to watch it. But let's be honest about this. The Book of Boba Fett was not really Boba Fett's story. The Book of Boba Fett was really Mandalorian 2A or Mandalorian Season 3. Probably Mandalorian 2A. It felt more like effectively bits of story that were left on the cutting room floor or in the writer's room on their ideas board for Mandalorian, and that never got fully developed. And so they decided that they would instead actually make a whole new show out of it and call that the Book of Boba Fett. Because watching the Book of Boba Fett, yeah, gosh. I mean, there's so much stuff. And others have I'm not going to relitigate what others, there's the other great commentary I've seen on it from different YouTubers. I know the guys at Salty Nerd, who, by the way, do some great stuff. If you're not tuned into the Salty Nerd podcast, check their stuff out. Robot Head, who else? I think Maul has done some stuff. Lots of other guys who produce The Critical Drinker, who I have an affinity with. He's Scottish, I'm Irish, both Celtic, both like drinking whiskey, both like fighting. But there's these good commentaries out there already that have covered stuff. I'm not going to relitigate it, but there was technical errors you could see in the show. Just the quality of what we got on screen was not as good. The sets themselves don't look as flash. The costuming, you contrast that. Remember the whole thing about George Lucas, and one of the geniuses of George Lucas, because I think he had a few, and one of the geniuses of George Lucas was this whole idea of used space, dirty space, and how this whole notion of you should be able to see like the rivets on spaceships and things. They shouldn't look like clean, sleek, silvery objects where you don't understand the mechanics of it. There should be a certain engineering and there's a mechanics of these ships and this world that you can understand and see, and it feels dirty and lived in and used. And it was reflected in the costuming. It was reflected in the models they built. It was, like they would take they would get old model kits and they would take the parts from in between, the punch outs, and they would cut those up and put them on as, pipes and stuff like that on their little models. And it was just a real artistic endeavor. Well, in the Book of Boba Fett, everything it all felt so clean, and it was like a bad TV show where they have literally just put the costumes on. They've literally got the costumes brand new, received them from whoever the maker of the costume was, and then chucked them on, and then they've filmed them in the brightest light possible. And so it doesn't look very filmic. It doesn't look very used. It's missing all I think so much of the genius of that Star Wars universe is just, it's missing. And someone here, Alex, has said, Star Wars post Lucas just feels soulless. And I think that's a good description of it. It just felt so soulless to me, and the sets weren't flash. I wasn't that impressed. Castro, thank you for your super chat again, says, do you watch anime? If so, recommendations. If no, please watch anime. I don't watch anime, never been a huge fan of it. My brother-in-law does, though. My wife's brother, he is a PhD in robotics. He's married to a Japanese girl. They have a couple of kids. They live in Japan. He works for a firm there, and I think he does lecturing actually at one of the universities. Great guy. And he's been a long-time fan of anime. I'm not, but I'm interested if people have got good anime. Don't tell me porn anime. I don't want to watch any anime with porn in it. Not interested. But any good anime, and maybe good anime that you think is sort of family-friendly as well, that maybe I could share with my kids, happy to hear your recommendations. I've just never really got into it, so I'm not a huge anime guy at all. But yeah, so the Book of Boba Fett, it was clean. It didn't feel like, it was soulless. It really did. And here's the thing. It was literally felt like a tack on to The Mandalorian, not its own standalone series. The other big problem is here, it could have been a standalone series, I think. But here's my critique. I think Boba Fett needed to be played by a different actor. And I can't believe I'm saying this as a Kiwi, a fellow Kiwi who is a big admirer of Temuera Morrison, who played Boba Fett, a big fan of his work. The guy is a really good actor. If you want to get a sense of his acting ability, watch the film Once Were Warriors. If you haven't seen Once Were Warriors, you should definitely watch that film. It's based on a book of the same name, and it was a really sort of brutal, no-holds-barred. Cliff Curtis is in it, by the way, a very young Cliff Curtis playing a character called Uncle Bully. And it's a really no-holds-barred look into... by the way, there's another actress who plays Beth Hickey. She's Jake's wife in Once Were Warriors. And Beth Hickey, I can't remember her name now. She's another Kiwi actress, really great actress. Rena Owen, that's it. Rena Owen plays Tim Morrison's wife. Jake, he's Jake the Muss, they call him in the film, Jake Hickey. And she's Beth Hickey, and she's married to him, and they've got an abusive marriage. He's an awful husband, a really violent, abusive, and he's been out of prison. It's a very stark, for those who remember Rena Owen was in, which was it, Attack of the Clones? Yeah, Attack of the Clones. She played the voice, she did the voice acting for one of the Camino, was it the Camino cloners? The big long-necked characters. She did the voice acting for one of those. And of course, Tim Morrison played Jango Fett, Boba Fett's dad, and that a younger Tim Morrison, a lot younger and leaner and everything else. But anyway, they appear together in a phenomenal film called Once Were Warriors. It's a New Zealand movie. If you haven't seen it, you should absolutely see it. Be warned, it's not family entertainment. It is a no-holds-barred look at the social issues that affect some sectors of the Māori community here in New Zealand, our Indigenous peoples. And, drinking and family violence and prison life and stuff like that. And it's a pretty harrowing tale, but there was a follow-up film after that, a part 2, that came out that was quite hopeful, and it shows sort of Jake's redemption and his road to recovery. And he starts discovering there's a life beyond the gangs and the violence and stuff, and he meets another couple of Māori fellas who are tradesmen, and they I think from memory they own their own company, and they go pig hunting on the weekends, and he gets connected with them, and he realizes, oh, these guys are actually good, upstanding members of the community. I don't need to live this life. I can be like these guys. I can make something myself. It's the hard movies, the harrowing movies, but that's Temuera Morrison, who plays Boba Fett in the Book of Boba Fett. Boba Fett is just rubbish compared to his acting ability. And if you haven't seen that film, Once Were Warriors, you should definitely check it out. Laserpants, thank you for the super chat, says, I highly recommend the anime series Dr. Stone. Tell me, have you seen it or others have seen it? Is Dr. Stone an anime series that I could sit down and watch with my kids? Is there anything I need to be aware of about it? But yeah, I'll definitely be interested in checking this out. In fact, see this magic pen, paper beside me. I'm in my office right now. Writes down Dr. Stone. Right. Who else does that? Stops in the middle of a show to write notes. Anime. There we go. Written it down now. So Book of Boba Fett. So if you want to watch Temuera Morrison, who played Boba Fett, actually doing real acting, and you see his range and the quality of what this guy has to offer, watch a film like Once Were Warriors. A very good New Zealand actor. So I can't believe I'm saying this, but it just, to me, you've got this Boba Fett character who it's sort of strange. It strains the credulity of the situation to see this guy who's now quite a bit older, and he is a lot bigger than what he was. If you want to see where Tim Morrison used to be as far as his physical form, watch him in Once Were Warriors. Gosh, he's just, what do the cool kids say? Pumped, jacked. He really was, young, fit, strong, very, very lean, muscly kind of guy. And so that guy could have played Boba Fett easily. But an older Tim Morrison, you've got this Boba Fett costume now that it honestly, it looks like bad anime. And then I mean bad cosplay, mixing up my words. He's got this suit that for some reason still fits him, when probably it really shouldn't fit him. Think about the breastplate armor. It's molded armor, right? So it's molded to a younger, thinner man, and now you've got an older, larger man who's wearing that same armor. But it's all he's got a piece on the front, a piece on the back, big gaps in between because his body's bigger than the armor actually is. It just doesn't look the same. It's not the same sort of thing. As I said, it feels like someone playing a formerly beloved character in a movie or a story. It doesn't really, it looks like that from the get-go. And that, straight away, that strains credulity. I think that brings you out of the show. It wasn't Flash. And as others have pointed out, why did the costume, why did the suit of armor rather, why did it grow with him? It shouldn't have, if he's got bigger, he's so big it doesn't look the same anymore and it's just pieces stuck on a guy. How does the army still fit him in the same way? It doesn't look right. I don't know why that, I don't know why they did that. It doesn't look right. The whole character was really built around the look of that character. It's not about his voice. It's not about all his wonderful exploits. It's about how he looks and the menacing nature of him. Taking the helmet off, straight away undoes all that mystique. And so I think they needed a different actor if they were going to go that way and put him back in an actual Boba Fett looking suit. So a younger, thinner actor. Maybe keep the helmet on and get Tim Morrison to do the voiceover, like he did with the Stormtroopers in other films. So do it that way. They definitely, I think they've written a different character. This guy, I don't know, it's weird. It was almost like they felt they had to do a redemption of Boba Fett's story. But once you redeem Boba Fett, it doesn't make sense that he would remain as this crime lord. It's kind of they're having the cake and eat it too. So they want to redeem the guy, but then they want to keep him as a crime lord, and it's like it doesn't make sense. It doesn't really work. He's got no menace anymore. Why would these people take this man seriously anymore? They just wouldn't. If he commanded some large horde or menacing horde or army or something, then maybe they'd be freaked out by the guy and it would all make sense. Laserpants says of that anime, Dr. Stone, he watched it with his 11-year-old son and he recommends it. Thank you, Laserpants. I will definitely check that out then. But it like they didn't write the right character, I don't feel. It was so weird. And then, of course, there's his sidekick, and how's this for memorable? I can't even remember her name, the character's name in the Book of Boba Fett, who's actually more menacing and is more of a Boba Fett than Boba Fett is in his own story. And without her, you don't have a you don't have any menace. You don't like without her, he would literally just be an old dude dressed up in a suit from some former bygone era, walking into a town and saying, "I'm here, you should be scared of me," and everyone would just laugh their heads off at him. It just, honestly, it was just cringe fest. The story was paper thin, and I think it was cringy in places. The bike gang, remember the bike gang, the Power Rangers? It's just, it is now. It's like the writer's equivalent of product placement. I have an awful sneaking suspicion that that bike gang, the plan was that maybe they were going to get their own series, or maybe they still are. I don't know. I'm just not following much of the news. Are they going to get their own spin-off cartoon series or something silly like that? They just felt so out of place. The story was so paper thin. And here's my final word on this, because I don't want to harp on this too long, but I think The Mandalorian, as far as live action storytelling goes, the Mandalorian story is really as thin as you want to go and as slow as you want to go. They really did, I think, stretch some things out a little bit too much in The Mandalorian across both seasons. And so the story is a little bit thin. Now, that's as thin as you want to go, though, with a live action series like this, I think, in my humble opinion. Boba Fett tried to go even thinner and slower in places, and it's just, it didn't work. And let's be clear, this was Mandalorian Season 3. Everyone was, what drew the crowds, I think, back as they were all flagging and rushing off to watch paint dry, was that all of a sudden Baby Yoda turned up again, and Mandalorian was there, and Luke Skywalker, right? It's the meme-berries, the nostalgia stuff. It's gotta love nostalgia, Need more nostalgia in my movies and my shows. And that was probably what saved it. But you strip that out, what have you got? You don't really have much. Could have been better, I think. Could have been. Or maybe it's one of those ideas where you say, look, this is a 2-episode run in another show. Like in The Mandalorian, it's not a whole series all by itself. There's just not enough here to sustain this. And in order to sustain this, to create this guy, they are literally now scraping the bottom of the barrel, taking the story and tearing it apart as thinly as they can, just trying to squeeze every morsel of money-making goodness they can get out of it, right? So take a character like Boba Fett, turn him into his own major centerpiece, give him a series, give him a whole big story, and as soon as you do that, you're skating on thin ice. So to do it, you've got to do it well. But then remember, you can't actually create the character probably you want to create, because you've got to situate him in an existing universe, an existing story. So you can't just completely undo everything that's already come before, or pull one of those silly Star Trek cheats like saying, "Oh, it's an alternate universe." And so, the story, there's just not much there. So maybe it was one of those things where it would have been better just to leave the idea on the ideas room floor and say, nah, someone come up and give me a plan for a 2-episode or 3-episode series of a story that would fit within The Mandalorian or within something else. But we're not going to try and stretch this thing out into a series all by itself. So for me, that's what I felt about the Book of Boba Fett. One thing I will say, though, is I did enjoy sitting down with my kids and actually watching a show that I could watch with my kids. We have this running joke now in our house. So I've stolen something that you've probably heard if you watch the Critical Drinkers content, which I highly recommend. Good, intelligent commentary on the artistic merits of different things. And it's a guy who's got a real eye for it, and he really knows what he's talking about when he talks about storytelling, so in story craft. So I'd highly recommend that. But he talks about the message. In other words, the sort of the woke propagandizing and the sexual propaganda and everything else that is now just constantly appearing in these films. Next episode, next month, I'm going to talk about Marvel and the future of Marvel, where I think it's heading, because I think it's collapsing in different ways, and this is one, the message. So we have this standing joke in our house now. We're watching a film or a TV series, and something propagandistic appears in the story on screen. Then one of us, normally it's me, but sometimes my kids now are doing it as well, they go, "The message," out loud, and everyone just chuckles because they know what it is. And often I'll say, like, we were watching Spider-Man the other day, the new Spider-Man movies, and something happened in that film, and I go, "The message," and one of my daughters goes, yeah, enough of the feminism already. One of my young daughters. So I have trained them well. Executor 66. So, the message. Where was I going with that? Aside from the message moments, and thankfully there weren't heaps, and they're sort of a bit more muted in this. They were there, but it's a bit more muted. So it was something that I could sit down and watch with my kids, though. And I did enjoy that aspect of it. And watching particularly my youngest, my older ones are now starting to get to a point where they recognize bad storytelling and they're not interested in it. They're not going to watch bad storytelling. My younger ones still, they sort of love the excitement and adventure of sort of these sort of things and don't go to that next deeper level yet. And so it's kind of cool to sit with them in a room and watch stuff like that. Is it El Chimmy? Am I saying your name right there? Your handle says that seems to be the basic premise of any Disney movie now. I think we're talking about being spread too thin. That's a cool avatar, mate. Is that a samurai I'm seeing on screen? I can't quite see. Let me know what that avatar is. That looks really, really cool. No Name says, I'm glad you're back. I'm looking forward to hearing your opinions on this film when I get off from work. Oh, No Name, thanks, mate. It is good to be back. As I said, I love this little community here on this particular Left Foot Media channel here that I've got. I love it. It's awesome. As those who've been watching, I've been doing other stuff and other projects and in the sort of the cultural and commentary and even political space. But I really still have such a heart for film and television and good storytelling because I think it's such an important part of the human experience. And when it's done well, it points us to the big truths of the human experience, the things that we need to grasp and understand to live a meaningful life. That's why instinctively all of us, when we watch a rubbish story, we feel unfulfilled and we know something's amiss. Even if it's the most expensive blockbuster rubbish story we've ever seen, we know if something's not right. Instinctively, you just feel it in your bones, or maybe over time, or you go back to it and you go, oh, it wasn't as good as I remember. You realize the hype's worn off and the honeymoon's gone and it's not as good. So yeah, I love being on this channel to be able to have these conversations about these things. Let's move on, though. So that's my thoughts on the Book of Boba Fett. The Will Smith Oscars slap, everyone saw that, right? It was memed to high heaven. Let me stop and take a drink. Only water today. Early in the morning. The Oscars slap, I'll just say this quickly. It's probably one of the most insane things I've seen from the elite classes in a while, and that's saying something. What I mean by that was just the sort of the blatant absurdity of the whole thing. You got an A-list actor who gets up and physically assaults a comedian for telling a joke that, quite frankly, if someone said something like that about my wife, here's how I'd handle it. If I felt it was on the nose, I would say, okay, look, we need to have a conversation. I have a quiet conversation with the person afterwards and I say, look, mate, it was on the nose. I think you should maybe apologise to my wife because what you said was just not particularly charitable or kind. That's how I deal with it, right? I go quiet with the person. The moment you get up and smack someone in the face for telling a joke like that is the moment that you're showing the world you don't have any prudence, no virtue. There's no virtue there. There's no impulse control. It's just crazy. I think it's about more than that, though. It wasn't just a guy who was having a bad night. I think it's a guy who's having a bad life, who's stuck in a bad situation. But the absurdity of all of this was crazy. So you get an A-list celebrity who gets up, physically assaults another man in probably one of the most public settings possible, like a global live audience. I know it's been shrinking, but it's still a global live audience, televised live in a huge auditorium full of people and lots of other celebrity people too, where you think you'd be even more cautious about your, keeping up appearances and all that, and you get up and you smack a guy in the face. And then you sit down and you start swearing at him. It was like, what the heck is this? And then, if that wasn't absurd enough, the Academy tweets out a tweet a bit later on saying, after all this has happened, saying, we don't condone violence in any form. And you're literally looking at this tweet saying, what? A guy just assaulted another guy at your event. The guy stayed there, wasn't asked to leave, as far as I'm aware. I know there was some initial evidence saying maybe he was asked to leave and then it was retracted and said they'd never asked him to leave. But a guy, he's there at this event, your event, the Academy Awards. He assaults another guy. He doesn't leave. He sits down, and not only does he sit down, but just minutes later, or, a short time later, you gave him an award. You gave him one of your Academy Awards. Now, and he got up and received it at the podium. He literally is just fresh from publicly assaulting another man, and he's like, I got to do. Sorry, I can't keep it straight face. I got to do better. Denzel Washington is a legend in my book. To me, he's like an elder statesman in Hollywood. And I think it's because he's got a substance to his personal life beyond Hollywood. The actors who have got substance, like they've got good, strong marriage and family life, they've got a Christian faith or perhaps some other faith of some kind or some solid philosophical grounding, it shows. And it shows in their behavior and the way they conduct themselves. And that comment he made where he said to Will Smith privately, and then Will Smith repeated it on the podium when he was getting his award, where he said, look, the devil always gets you when you're at your peak. In other words, pride comes before a fall, mate. Sort yourself out. And Will Smith's getting up there, I gotta be the love. And I'm like, dude, you literally just assaulted a man. This is so insane. And so the Academy's tweeting about how they don't condone violence after giving a guy an award after all of this happening. And it's like this weird little brief insight. It was like a moment of honesty and clarity that you don't often get, where all of a sudden the curtain dropped, the veil dropped, and we saw behind the curtain, and we saw a bunch of elites sitting in a room together watching one man verbally and physically assault another man and then sit down and then get an award for it, and everyone's just like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, cool, yeah. So whose place are we going to afterwards to do lines of crack cocaine? Yeah. It's like, it was the most insane thing ever. And it's a great example of why these people are not, I say this to my kids all the time. When a person opens their mouth to offer you advice about morality, look at their life first. Don't listen to what they say if they don't back up their words with actual action. If they don't walk the talk, then don't try and imitate the talk that they're offering, right? So what you've got to do is they're not a good role model for morals and virtues and stuff. Is that Spectre? I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce your avatar, but it says kind of like a scene from a movie, not like they are actors or anything. Love makes you do crazy things. What? Look, I'm telling you, mate, you need to go and read some Aristotle and some Thomas Aquinas on virtue, because I'm telling you right now, that is not what love is. If you think that's what love is, no, what you have is impulse control and a problem with passions. Your passions are out of control. You have sentimental feelings, your feelings got out of control, and then that made you do, not a crazy thing, it made you do a very immoral thing, a thing that lacked virtue to another human being. And that's not love. Love is an action, a tangible action in the real world, is the act of self-giving. You give of yourself for the good of another. Smacking a man in the face and abusing him verbally is the exact opposite of that. So, love for my wife turned me into a psycho. Nigel, thanks for the super chat. He says, Smith slap missed Chris Rock. Listen to the audio. Yeah, I know some people said they thought it was a fake and a setup. I don't think it was a setup. There's too much going on there that I absolutely think that was real. I think there's other ways they could have played that if they wanted a moment that they were looking for some setup to try and generate Oscar buzz, if you like, and that's really not the way to do it. Being someone who, in my other life, does a bit of work where I help organizations with, media communications, and often that involves like public appearance and optics and PR and stuff like that. And having worked in some PR spaces previously, I can tell you that this sort of thing would be the worst thing for you to try and manage. Like if you were going to do something where you wanted to drum up attention, but you wanted to do something a little bit, you wanted something to go viral, a bit of guerrilla marketing, as the cool kids used to say, this wouldn't be the thing to do, because there's just so many moving parts and so much damage that all of the risk level basically is too high. So and then if you look at the actual evidence, I mean, it's clear that Chris Rock, he's got an adrenaline hit from it. It's not, and you don't get adrenaline spikes from something that you were expecting. Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind it was real. So, I don't believe it was a setup. And so I know some of you here might think it was. I don't think it was. And I'm not quite yet at that level of cynicism with the establishment. Look, I'm an Irishman, and I have plenty of reasons not to trust the Crown. And I often tell my kids that, like, you've got to have a healthy skepticism of politicians and those who wield power, because power is a very corrupting thing. But I'm not quite at that level of cynicism where I think that they got that they set this thing up, a fake assault. comment from, how do I say that? Is it Ajay? Ajay says, yeah, I know it's not love at all. Yeah, no, I wasn't meaning you. I was directing my comments at Will Smith, my imaginary comments. Yeah, and so this is a good point. I was going to talk about this, the Dave Chappelle show. So Dave Chappelle got tackled by some guy who clearly was upset that, this guy's making jokes that are effectively that they are a form of commentary. He's saying things about ideologies that I adhere to that I don't like. And that's what if I understand it correctly, that's what happened here. And I'm assuming this guy's not mentally unwell, who just had a mental break. And for some reason, I'm tackling Satan. As I understand it, there's some ideological connection here. But yeah, but what was funny was when Chris Rock said afterwards, did you see Chris Rock? And Chris Rock said, was that Will Smith? Oh gosh. So that was Chris Rock's, he got his payback. So the whole thing was bizarre. I think it was clearly a sign of a deeper personal and marital crisis for Will Smith. It's clear. Everyone knows the stories. Let's not relitigate them. It's horrible. That marriage needs a lot of healing and a lot of work. And if they're not going to work on it, then it would be best, I think, to stop keeping up this absurd falsehood, this absurd lie. Yeah, we have an open marriage. Like, we really love each other, but we also are engaged in promiscuous sex with lots of other people as well. We'll call it an open marriage. You don't have a marriage at that point, pal. A marriage is built on the vows that you make to be faithful, in totality for life to that other person, barring some sort of unforeseen crisis that completely destroys that and is, beyond your control, like death, or like a person who is abusive, and where it absolutely would be better and more right to leave a situation where you are in danger, or you are the person is failing to honour their end of the marriage vows. But the moment you haven't got the vows present anymore, you haven't got that. You've got something else altogether. But anyway, so there's a deeper marital and personal crisis going on. And it was funny. Do you remember Rebel Wilson made that joke, which was actually a lot more cutting and a lot harsher than what Chris Rock did at the BAFTAs? And it was about his wife's sexual infidelity. Now, it was clear in his public reaction, I don't think he was at the BAFTAs, was he? But he responded to that and he was clearly upset about it. But the thing is, he wasn't there. He couldn't very well go and attack Rebel Wilson either. Just that's not going to fly, right? But here was a guy in front of him in the moment, right? I think this whole volcano was boiling away ever since that Rebel Wilson thing and with everything else that was going on. And then Chris Rock made a completely different joke that happened to involve his wife. And that was it. The volcano erupted. And this was a guy in front of him who he could get up and he could physically assault and abuse. And I think that's what happened. It was like a symptom of a deeper issue. But as I said, it speaks volumes about the privilege and the morality of the Hollywood classes. It is very paper thin. There are some celebrities, I think, who are genuinely good and moral people, and you can tell the ones who are because they live, you look at them off screen and they live normal lives, or often you don't hear from them at all. And usually they're very good actors, they are committed to their craft, and you never hear from them otherwise. Because it's not, they actually live real lives and are dedicated craftsmen, but they are few and far between. I think of a guy like Sir Anthony Hopkins. That's the difference. There we go. It's pronounced Ajay. Hi from Sweden, man. It's good to see you. Ajay. Mud Punch says, I'm on the toilet right now. Thanks for sharing, as we say in our house, TMI. Too much information. Enjoy that. Enjoy that. Here's someone else says, Reversory 79, the connection with the pharmaceutical company is too weak and alopecia was never mentioned, making it useless as a publicity stunt. Yeah, I don't think, and like claiming now, I saw afterwards, this was one of the funny things, all these groups jumped on the bandwagon. This is ableism. He made a joke about a serious disability, alopecia, and I'm like, look, alopecia would be a challenge for anyone to have to grapple with. If you've had a head of hair and then just things start falling out in patches and it's, no one likes to look odd in their appearance. It's not really something you ever get used to, and it's not an easy thing, but it's not a disability. Come on. This is absurd. I felt like say, there's real people in the real world who actually have real disabilities, right? And it's an absurdity, and it's in a sense you want to talk about ableism, quote unquote. elevating hair loss to the level of disability, while there are people potentially who live in just down your street who have been confined to wheelchairs for life, or who struggle with other serious physical or mental disabilities, and you're saying, yeah, alopecia, it's a serious disability, man. It's like, what? That's just absurd. I've got an ingrown toenail. I'm really, I don't like jokes about ingrown toenails. I think that's such ableism. Castro, thanks again for another super chat. Good Christian movie recommendations. There you go, team. One thing I watched recently, I've watched a couple of good films lately, by the way. What was one I watched was really, really good that I watched recently? If you haven't seen, by the way, A Hidden Life, Terrence Malick's latest film, that's a very good movie. It is such good filmmaking. I know some people might not. It's a longer film. Terrence Malick's style is just so immersive, and he's a phenomenal filmmaker, but I know he's not everybody's cup of tea. Thin Red Line, some people really loved that, others didn't. Tree of Life was one I think was a bit more hit and miss with people. But A Hidden Life is beautiful, and it tells this true story of a guy called Franz Jägerstätter who's now on his way. He's to becoming a canonized Catholic saint, actually. He refused to husband with a wife and 3 kids, refused to join Hitler's army because he said, I'd have to swear an oath of allegiance to Hitler if I did that. And this man he said, I'd have to betray my faith in Jesus if I did that. And so no. And he was imprisoned and beaten and eventually killed for refusing to do that. And everyone else around him says, don't be stupid, just do it. And he says, no, I can't do that. It's a very beautiful film, a very, very raw film at times. So I'd recommend that. That's a great film, A Hidden Life. I watched something else recently, and it's just completely slipped my mind, which was actually quite a good film. One film that I really enjoyed recently was, I want to say Atonement, but that is not the right film. I'm going to do something here. No, I won't do it here. I will look up on my iTunes right now to see if I can find the title of this film, because I would absolutely recommend it. I'm going to turn my phone on and do it that way. Gosh, this is well prepared, isn't it? It is a film called Dun Dun Dun. Look at that. As soon as I turn my phone on, all my blooming messages start buzzing in, 100 miles an hour. But the movie that I watched is called, come on. Stars Oscar Isaac. Was it Oscar Isaac? Sorry. We're going to talk about him in just a moment. And Christian Bale. It's taken ages to load these films. It is called, let me try and find it for you. I wanted to say Atonement, but Atonement is absolutely not the right name for this film. Gosh, there's a rule in radio, and that rule and TV is you should never have dead air. So that's why I'm talking my head off right now as I look at my phone, desperately trying to find this film in my collection. I've been building up a collection of films on iTunes and DVD and other stuff, because I think we're going to have to drop our streaming service, because, yeah, it's just getting so full of woke propaganda. I'm like, look, why would I give you money to say things that are just not only I completely disagree with, but things that are just so reprehensible to, vibrant human flourishing and strong societies. The film is called, let me find it. I'm going backwards now, sorry. Here it is. No. Man, I've got too many films in this collection. Man, never ever do this live on air. So this is how not. Here it is. It is called The Promise. The Promise is what it's called. And it stars, let me see if you can see this on the screen here. Probably not going to work, is it? No, that's terrible. The Promise. Oscar Isaac, Christian Bale, and it tells, it's based on true story, a lot of a true story, but it's set in the Armenian genocide. Very few films tell the true story about the Armenian genocide, and it was actually a pretty good film. I really enjoyed it. So if you haven't seen The Promise, then watch it. Yeah, okay, so let's move on. Moon Knight. Has everyone watched Moon Knight? This was one of those shows I quite enjoyed for one big reason. My eldest daughter, who's become she turns 15 tomorrow, she's become a bit of a Marvel fanatic. She often comes to me and says, Dad, have you heard the latest news about Marvel? And she's very intelligent, my daughter, loves her Marvel though, hates stuff. She does not do the woke stuff at all. She'll tell me, look, Dad, I watched this film. It was terrible. Woke garbage. It's funny. My 15-year-old daughter, love it. But she and I got to sit down together and watch Moon Knight. And that was each week, a new episode would drop and we'd sit down together here in New Zealand on a Wednesday night and watch it together. And it was, I enjoyed it. That was a big plus for me to be able to sit down and watch it with my daughter. Here's the thing. I know some people have been very critical of Moon Knight, but I'm not as critical. I actually thought it was okay. It took me back to a sort of a different time, a simpler time, a more sentimental family television era. It was the sort of show, I'll probably watch it with my younger ones actually now as well, that I've seen the whole thing through. There's not too much. It's actually the scary moments more than anything else. There were some moments of what I would call the message in this, the message. Thank you, critical drinker, trademark, copyright, critical drinker. But it was the sort of the woke propaganda stuff. But it wasn't as, it's not like other stuff where it's literally just hackneyed lines of dialogue. And you're sitting there watching a film and all of a sudden a character says or does the dumbest and stupidest thing in the world. And it's so blatantly propagandizing. And you're just like, stop it, just stop it, get back to the story. At times now I feel like they've got a quota board where they're literally looking at a board in the writer's room and they're saying, okay, guys, I noticed we haven't ticked female empowerment, at least 3 female empowerment moments in this episode. We've only got 1. We need 2 more, quick. Like they're shoehorning stuff in that way. It really does feel like that now, so much of the stuff. The one thing, though, that there was the message was how the female character in this, in the final episode, suddenly becomes a superhero in her own right, but a really powerful superhero who's more powerful than our main superhero. He's been on a journey of, I thought it was quite a good journey, actually, quite a good character arc, and for both characters, actually, that are played here, that goes on throughout the story. And from sort of more weakness and division and lack of cooperation to unified, complementarity. They recognize their strengths and their weaknesses and they work together. And so therefore, what that means is, in theory, they should be, as a character, even more powerful at that moment at the end than what they were at the beginning. When they're divided and fighting against each other and they don't know what's going on and they're confused and one of them's just like, total... just a weakling noob who's out of his depth. The other guy's a psycho who doesn't care about the other. Like that character should definitely, I think, be less powerful than the character who suddenly finds this unity of self. The 2 halves come together as one whole. They complement each other. They've figured it all out. That should be a more powerful character. What happens though at the very end was this female character, one of the leads, suddenly becomes a superhero in her own right, and just like that, like instantly she becomes the superhero, and she is more powerful than the main character, and she has no issues. She just slots straight away. Honestly, you would think she has been this not Wonder Woman, for those who've seen the series, character for years, right? It's got that sort of feel about it. It's like, no, it shouldn't. She should be someone who's literally just come into this newfound power at the very final end of the series. She should be acting just like these guys were at the beginning, stumbling around, not clear about what's going on, but she wasn't. And again, that was the whole female empowerment. And it was like, no, it's fake. It's hackneyed, it's shoehorned, it's not good storytelling. But as I said, why I think that was forgivable is it's just sort of there briefly and then it disappears again, if you know what I mean. And it's not like a character preaching at you, but yeah, it was what I got watching that scene in that moment was the characters just couldn't, the writers, just couldn't bring themselves to write a female character who might have weakness. It's like they personally have a character flaw themselves now where they can't bring themselves to actually write honestly about females and female characters, or males for that matter. So they're very cynical about males and they hold a completely overly romanticized vision and a completely, I think at times, irrational vision of physical strength on the part of females, among other things. And so you have this sort of one where you turn females into the goddess, you turn males into the when you tolerate them, they are the bumbling idiots who are there to help show the world why females are even better. And it's like they can't bring themselves just to write an honesty about it. It sort of felt like that, but it was minor. But what I liked about it was, here's the thing I liked about it. It's his wife. Yeah, good point. And I can't even remember her name. I'm so sorry about that. How's this for a shocker? I sat down to watch the second to last episode with my daughter. So this is last week, not the one just been on Wednesday night, not the final episode. And I'd had such a long, hard day of work and a really early start and go. And we sat down after dinner, put this on, and the big key finale moment in that film, I was asleep. So I'm sitting on one end of the couch, she's on the other, and she says to me, "Dad, wake up." And it's over. The episode's over. Now that wasn't really a reflection on the series itself, because I actually quite enjoyed it. But I fell asleep. And during the most critical moment when he's out of the boat, right? Yeah, here we go. If you didn't see the post-credit scene on the last episode of Moon Knight, then you didn't see the real ending. Yeah, that's right. And I did. We watched that together. We saw the post-credit scene. It is an interesting thing. He's not free at all. He never fully actualized the third person as the killer. And he's unfettered by morality, it seems. Yeah, and I'm interested to see how that plays out. Because clearly I thought that was a great setup, by the way, for a next possible season and a next story arc. And it actually it's not just rehashing the same stuff. It's not just villain of the week type stuff. There's now, again, there's more complexity than what you even thought in that character. So I'm actually okay with that. And it'll be interesting to see whether they mess it up or not, or whether they do it well. Because if they do it well, then what you will have is a genuine internal morality struggle. It'll be a morality tale. And that character, he will become their nemesis. And if they do it well, it'll be a story about a guy overcoming his own vices, his own internal temptations towards evil, and overcoming it with good, but it won't be cheesy, it won't be hackneyed, and the evil character won't just be paint by numbers, the evil character won't just be a placeholder, they'll be the sort of character where you think, okay, I understand their motivations as well, but ultimately good will triumph over evil, like if they do it right. But hey, we'll see what happens. I haven't seen, Philander Phillips says, the new Doctor Strange movie also suffers from the same OP female characters. I haven't seen Doctor Strange yet. How's this? My 15-year-old daughter is going to watch Doctor Strange tomorrow at the movie. She turns 15 tomorrow. So for her birthday, she had this plan. She was going to watch the movie twice over the weekend, Friday night and Sunday, because had one, her cousin, good friend of hers, couldn't come when she was going with her other friends, her school friends. So she's going to watch it once on Friday night, then on Sunday. But the whole thing got messed up. And as a result, she now is going to watch the movie Doctor Strange tomorrow twice. She's going to go in the afternoon. So in the morning, she'll be out refereeing netball that she does on Saturday morning for a paid job, refereeing netball. And then she's going to watch Doctor Strange just after lunch. And then she's going back that night with her cousin to watch it again. Same movie theatre, same movie. That is dedication. So I haven't seen it yet, so I'll get a report back from her, but I've heard some of that from people as well, and apparently it's quite violent too. Yeah, so we'll sort of see what happens there with Moon Knight Season 2. What I liked about it, though, was this. It is quite a self-contained story, and what I mean by that is there's not constant referencing to the Avengers and... this is the problem Marvel's got right now. And I'll talk about this next month, is Marvel is now at risk of collapsing under the weight of its own complexity. And it's all just so tied together, and you have to go and watch 10 different movies before you watch the current movie to understand what's going on. And that's not a sustainable storytelling model going forward, because people will just tune out. They go, well, I was too young for that movie 10 years ago. And I haven't seen it. I don't understand this one now. So it's like, you don't understand, you're not going to turn up, right? So... This one though was self-contained. It wasn't. You didn't have to have seen any other stuff to have watched this and still got something out of it. It also, I think, had its own flavour. It was a Marvel thing, but I liked the stylistic nature of it, and its tone was different. It feels different from the recent Marvel outings, other Marvel outings. So I quite liked it in that way. It had its own little flavour. It wasn't perfect. Had its flaws for sure. What it was it didn't really feel like what Marvel has now become, and I really enjoyed it. As again for me, a big thing was the fact that I could sit down with my daughter and have this father-daughter time each week, and something that we could actually watch together, get a bit of entertainment and enjoyment out, a bit of escapism, Not constantly having to go, oh my gosh, what's this? Or having to go, we've got to turn this off and stop watching it. Because we've had that with other stuff. Start watching. I'm one of the things I'm really proud of my daughter for, and I'm so grateful for, is, and I'll credit her mother more than me for this, but she's a very discerning watcher. And if this propagandistic rubbish, she just goes, Dad, I started watching this series and I had to shut it off because it just got too this or too that. And I was like, good on her. That's good. But yeah, we did. So this was something we could watch, and there wasn't any of that sort of stuff. Subject Keita says she should try for this record of watching Doctor Strange the most times. What'll be interesting to see is whether or not she goes and watches Doctor Strange tomorrow and comes home and goes, Dad, that was rubbish, and I've got to now watch rubbish twice in a row. Or whether she comes home and goes, Dad, that was awesome, I really enjoyed it. She's more critical, so I imagine I'll get a pretty honest accounting for the film. So in other words, she'll tell me if she thinks, things were good about it, things were bad about it. She won't, it won't be a blind sort of obsessed version of events where, Doctor Strange can do no wrong. So yeah, we often trade comments about what's going wrong with Marvel. And she's, as I said, she's really in that fan stage, loves Marvel now to bits. And I get it, because there's things about Marvel that are good. There's things about Marvel that are just becoming an absolute diabolical mess. Anyway, some series that I recommend before we, and some other things I just want to talk about quickly before we get into the Batman. And I want to talk about the Batman itself and also Zack Snyder's Justice League, because people have asked me about that. And so I thought, well, let's tie these two together. So first of all, I've watched a new documentary series, HBO documentary series called The Way Down. And I watched it over a couple of nights. 6 episodes. It's about the remnant church in the United States. It's such an interesting documentary. A lady called Gwen Shamblin Lara. And the name The Way Down, W-A-Y, as in going way down, is a play on the words way down, W-E-I-G-H, way, as in your weight. Because this church, which became effectively like a cult, had a weight loss program they sold called Way Down, and it was supposedly this Christian weight loss program. The ultimate destruction of authentic Christian faith and tradition turned Jesus into a diet guru. And that's what she did effectively. Hey, look, I've got this Christian model for dieting, which was literally just, don't eat too much, big boy. And I can say that because I used to be a big boy, 140 kgs at my peak, way morbidly obese. And it was sort of like, it's about food control and portion control, but then they became obsessed with it. And if people lost weight and then started to put on weight again, all of a sudden she said, that means that God no longer favors you. And it was just, like, you want to talk about cult. It was crazy. It's just crazy. Now, I started watching the series not knowing anything about this group called the Remnant Church. I have a very healthy skepticism about documentaries now in general, because so many documentaries now I don't think they're good documentaries. They tend to be either unthinking advocacy, so they take one side, they are there to try and convince you that their argument is the only argument and everyone else is wrong, so they're not honest enough. And the problem with that is they're usually not upfront about it. When they're upfront about it, I'm fine with it. So when I watch a documentary by someone who I know what their philosophy is and they tell me what they're trying to convince me of, that's a dialogue, that's an engagement with their ideas, and I'm happy to do that. When someone tries to tell me that their documentary, which is actually an advocacy piece, is neutral and objective and, no, that's where I have the problem. So you get a lot of that. And then the other flip side of it is that a lot of documentaries they're often really just cynical attack pieces now. They don't document and observe like a good documentary does. A good documentary draws you into an event or a story or a person in a way that you see the good and the bad, and you can evaluate without prejudice. And it's also artistically well done. It's just, there's a well-crafted something. Errol Morris, by the way, really set the standard for this. If you're not a documentary watcher and you're like, why would I watch boring documentaries, Brennan? Blah. Watch Errol Morris's documentaries. Go back and watch The Thin Blue Line. He is the guy who created basically the template that modern documentarians really now aspire to. He changed the way documentaries were done. And The Thin Blue Line but any of Errol Morris's documentary work you should absolutely watch. The artistic recreations with like an orchestral score. It wasn't just a dude sitting there being interviewed. Now it was a whole other thing going. It was very narrative, and so good documentaries can be really, really good. So I'm a bit skeptical though. Often they're just hit pieces now. So, and it's about a church. I don't know anything about this church. I don't know whether it's a cult or not. And I'm thinking, am I just going to get a whole lot of, so there's some genuine issues here with these people. They've become like a culty group. But at the same time, this person is just using this as a cudgel to attack Christianity because they're anti-religious. They've got an anti-Christian prejudice. So I'm just going to hear a whole lot of anti-Christian prejudice tied up in what is a genuine issue here with a group that's acting like a cult that should be critiqued. So I go with a little bit of skepticism. Let's see what they deliver. What's interesting about this documentary is it's actually a really unusual narrative. It's told over a series of episodes. What makes it so unusual is that there's a plane crash, and your main actors, quote unquote, the subject of your documentary, killed. She died in a plane crash. And it's such a weird thing because the documentary is not about the plane crash. Like normally that's what you might expect. It's the documentary is about the errant behaviour of the subject, and then the main person you're focusing on actually died in a plane crash. I think, as I understand it, during the making of this documentary. So all of a sudden there's this weird narrative shift, and it's actually quite unique. It's unusual. How all of a sudden the whole thing shifts and turns on a dime a little bit because of that. And I think that was an unusual aspect of it, which for me was like, this is just a bit different than what you usually get. I would call it a pretty good documentary until the final 2 episodes. And what I think happened in the final 2 episodes was I don't think they knew how to end it. It started to lose its objectivity. It started to lose what had been a pretty good objective documentary. It's just accounting and having people tell their stories and present their stories. But then all of a sudden it starts to get petty, and there was a comment in there from a lady who'd been a former hairdresser, and she's making jokes about this woman's hair, and because the hair was a bit crazy. But it's like, hold on, this lady's dead, remember? She died in a plane crash. Now, for any of her other faults, you're talking about a dead person who died in a plane crash with her husband, her second husband, and a stepdaughter, and other people too. And it's like it felt at that point they'd moved into this petty sort of territory. What it felt like in the last 2 episodes was they didn't quite know how to end the story. So here's it's clear they had a documentary ending in mind, and if I understand this correctly, I could be wrong, but looking at the documentary, it does seem to me that the plane crash came after they'd started production on the documentary. And so it sort of derailed a little bit what possibly would have been a normal trajectory for a documentary like this, which would have been, you would have ended it with a call for accountability or something like that, or a court case outcome or something, right? Not the person being dead in a plane crash. So, but it was interesting. It had enough there for me so it's called The Way Down, if you're interested in that sort of thing. There's one, keep an eye out for, there's a black lady in it who I quite love. It's like she was just so honest. I loved her because there was a couple of really great moments of honesty. Like she's just talking away about things that were going on in this church that had become a cult, and she's just like, hell no, I ain't doing that. It was just so honest. She was just like, that's it, I draw the line at that. And then there's this great moment where her husband decided he was going to still keep going to the church even though she left. So her husband is there with the wife and kids, and they had this really dodgy practice in this church of, if your wife or your husband had left you or was not there, they would put someone else alongside your husband or your wife. So if you were looking at it on the live stream or on TV, you would think, oh, that was, so this guy, this black guy, still married to this woman, but he still wants to go to this church, he's taking the kids, and then sitting on the end of the row every time he's there is another woman they've put alongside him. It looks like they're a little family together. And this black woman saw it on the TV one morning and saw him sitting there with this other woman there beside him, and she just ripped shreds off him when he got home and said, that's it. It's him, it's that church or me. It's her or me. And to his credit, her husband said, right, that's it. I never went back to that church again. Now, that was brilliant. And there was another cool little moment too where she said, some of her black friends, it was actually quite good, where she said, oh, let me talk to the black people out there. And she said, some of her black friends said, well, how could you go to this church full of white people? And she said, it wasn't about race. it was about the community, about what I thought was something good and true there. And in other words, don't get fixated on race. I thought it was actually quite a beautiful little moment. But yeah, anyway, so that's called The Way Down. A series that I actually recommend that I think is really good, but I think it's really only good for one reason. And I don't know if without this one important factor whether it would actually be as good. And that is the Apple TV series Slow Horses. I don't know if you've seen this yet or not. Gary Oldman is ultimately he's the main character. It's a British spy thriller series, and it is very good. But let's be honest, the plot itself is a little bit the story is a little bit paper thin. I think there's not much of a story there. You've got some guys who have kidnapped a man. Here's the premise: some guys have kidnapped a man. They are going to execute him publicly on a live stream. Here's the thing, though: they are white people who have kidnapped a Muslim man, and they're going to behead him live on TV for the glory of England. And I'm looking at this premise, and I'm going, what? Okay, so that's really woke propagandistic nonsense. That is just literally flipping reality on its head, and purely for, just woke politicism. If it was honest, it'd probably be the other way around. But I'd imagine they'd be thinking, we can't make that because it won't be as popular, right? And people might get offended. But let's make a story about the imagined threat of these British white nationalists, I guess they're supposed to be, who are planning to behead a Muslim man live on TV because they want to restore the glory of Britain. Old Brittany, she's going down in a heap. Let's restore her. Let's kill some natives, and that'll bring back the team spirit. It's like, no. So it's a bit woke in that regard. And the premise beyond that is really flimsy and thin. Basically, it's just a bit of a chase playing out. So what's really the main story, if you like, the main story arc, is actually really secondary, though, to the characters and their story arcs. Which is why I think it's, if without that there wouldn't be much of a series there at all. But the really important part of it, though, is, and the thing that saves that show and makes it a cut above is Gary Oldman. Gary Oldman plays this character, and gosh, it's some of his best acting. I think certainly he's just immersed himself in this character, and it's some of his best acting I have seen in a long time. And he plays a guy who's a disgraced former spy from the British spy from the Cold War era. And he's been put out to a pasture, really. It's a place they call Slough House. And it's where they put their rejects, and he's in charge of it. And it is literally, it's a house, an old house they operate out of. Meanwhile, the elite British spies have got their own proper postmodernist, massive, glass and technology building that they're operating out of with all the latest technology and the latest vehicles. And these guys from Slough House are literally the rejects. And you are sent to Slough House if you've done something, you've basically got out of favour. So you've made a mess of something, or you've embarrassed someone, you've embarrassed the wrong person, or you've failed the wrong person, and they send you off to Slough House. And so he's got a collection of quote-unquote rejects from the British spy service, and they ultimately figure out who the bad guy is, and they save the world. They save Britain and save the day. But Gary Oldman is the guy who's in charge. He's the director of the Slough House. And honestly, he is literally, I swear, if you haven't seen it, you can smell the guy's clothing. Like he's literally sleeping in his clothes. He's not changing his clothes. He's wearing clothes that look like they might have been acceptable for the bureaucratic classes in the 1960s and 70s, right? And he's not wearing them well, and they're old. He's disheveled. He smokes. He drinks. He's sitting there in what would normally be in other TV series quite serious scenes. So there's one scene in particular I think of where he's meeting with his former colleague. She's now in charge of the spy agency and this operation, and he's sitting there. He's met with her clandestinely at a park bench because there's a whole subterfuge going on, and so they're meeting to discuss what is a very serious moment and a very serious, that's quite a good thriller in that regard. And then he's sitting there on this park bench beside her, He is park bench, yeah. And he just lets rip this massive fart. And he says, "Oh, I can't remember what he says. He says, "Oh, that's a smell of last religion." Some silly quote like that. And honestly, it's like this character is it's brilliant characterization. Like he's immersed himself in this really eccentric, but also in here very astute spy master because he's had so much experience. He's an old guy who doesn't have all the technology, but has got the experience. He knows he's an old dog with good tricks. And Gary Oldman plays him so well. And then there's this backstory that you find out towards the end of the series about he's even a lot more complicated as a character, and he might actually even be villainous. But they only introduced that towards the end. But it is pretty good. It's pretty good. But let me be clear about this. Gary Oldman is the only reason that show works. Without him, it would be another sort of very typical British spy thriller type show. With a little bit of budget involved. As I said, not the greatest story in the world, and the other characters around him, they're good. They're good actors. They do their bit, but he shines, man. If you don't want to watch the whole series, don't. But just go and watch episode 1 and watch Gary Oldman. It's worth it just for that. Without him, there wouldn't be much of a. I don't think it would be getting the same acclaim. One last thing I want to talk about before I get to the main topic today, which is the Batman and the Snyder Cut, and that is James Bond, the final James Bond film. What did I think about it? Because some people have been asking me about this. I think this film had all the ingredients for a great send-off for Daniel Craig. As far as I'm concerned, this is my humble opinion, I think Skyfall is the best James Bond film that's ever been made, and there's reasons for that, different reasons for that. One of the things for me that I really love is the fact that you've got Roger Deakins, who did the cinematography, and Roger Deakins is just, I will watch a film if he's attached to it. He works with Denis Villeneuve a bit, so Roger Deakins did the first Sicario, the cinematography of that. He did 1917 with Sam Mendes. He did the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. He did Prisoners with Denis Villeneuve. He's a guy who works with natural light a lot, and it's beautiful. His cinematography is worth the outing alone. And so he worked on Skyfall, and there's a really different tone to that. I've said for a while now that I would really love if they made a James Bond film with they let Christopher Nolan write and direct his own James Bond film. I think that would be a good combination. But Skyfall I think it's the best of the Craig Bond films. I think it's because it's got a story that actually there's something more there, and it's a bit more meaningful, I think. And it was good, and the cinematography it's very well crafted. It's the best Bond film, I think, overall as well. Others Bond purists might say, "How dare you?" Mr. Sean Connery would disagree. But I loved Skyfall. Then along came the subsequent outing, which was Spectre, wasn't it? Spectre after that, and it didn't quite climb the heights. And so it was really, though, for a bit of a send-off. You had all these different characters and things assembled to give, I think, Daniel Craig a good send-off and lots of potential. This is Astro says, No Time to Die had so much potential but kept dropping the ball. The ending was just awful. And you're right. That's what I want to talk about. There's great moments in this film, but there's a couple of good action set pieces. The story collapsed in the final act. And it's so frustrating. Honestly, it was almost at the final act that the main villain who they'd built up, who I thought was an interesting villain, all of a sudden just didn't mean anything anymore. That's one problem. The other thing that was interesting is before we even get to the final act, I'll talk about the final act in a second, this is the first James Bond movie with an F-bomb in it. Was it Mallory dropped an F-bomb? Yeah, it was Mallory who did it, didn't he? He was certainly in the conversation with Mallory. And there's an F-bomb. And I'm thinking, what is it? Like this cheap absurdity. It was like this, it felt so out of place. I'm assuming that it was written into the script and the characters didn't just add a little bit on the day. Either way, the director should have said, nah, that it's out of place. It was just weird. It's like, oh, are we doing this now? So it was like, yeah. Then we get the things like the character of Paloma, that female spy lady played by Ana de Armas. She's in that big bar scene, that bar fight scene. Her character felt confused to me and sort of out of place. It was like, she felt like she belonged in a, I don't know, almost like an Austin Powers movie. It was sort of weird. It was, whether it was the tone of how she was directed or the way that character was written, or a combination of both, just didn't quite feel like it gelled. It was very weird. And then, of course, there was the message, the woke propagandizing. So we get, of course we do. We get the introduction of Q as Q's a homosexual, and he's having dinner. He's having a dinner date with his homosexual love interest. And it's like, okay. And we've got a female 007. And she's a black female 007, and she's here to put 007 in his place. And it's like, look, I get it. I'm not holding up Bond films, and no one should do this. They are not paragons. I've heard some terrible arguments in the past. People say, yeah, leave James Bond alone, because James Bond is like a really great example of traditional, masculinity, authentic masculinity. It's like, no, he's not. James Bond would have probably herpes and AIDS and gonorrhea 20 times over by now. He's not a great model of anything. But you don't solve one issue by introducing this garbage and doing this. And so you have this sort of woke, propagandistic, cliched nonsense. It's just vacuous and hollow. It's like, James Bond is getting put in his place by the new female 007. And she doesn't feel right. She's doing things that you go, okay, I'm sort of we're straining credulity again here to believe that, she's this effectively a special forces soldier. Like James Bond is a male, ex-SAS member. It makes sense that, he would be, and as a male, their physical presence in the world, all of that, the male ego, the male propensity, if it's not kept in check by virtue towards violence and things like that, it makes sense. James Bond would be a male character, and you have male spies who do these frontline, that basically, as I said, the actions of a special forces type character. But just sort of sticking a female in that who really doesn't look like she's up to the part at all, but is certainly talking like she is. And then they make a big point of this 007, and then it's like, okay, so stay in a lane, because what do they do at the end of the film, the final act? She then gives him back the number. She then says to him, no, one of those terrible cheesy, you've earned it, you're actually the real 007. I've had our numbers reassigned. And I'm watching this, I'm going, this is so stupid. It's like, at least if you're going to commit to something dumb, commit to it. Don't then just literally do a complete 180 and in such a way that it makes no sense. It's like, imagine if you rang up MI6 and said, hey, look, guys, it's me. It's 007 here. I'm on the front lines. And something really important. We're at a critical junction now. We're tracking down a bioweapon that literally could spell doom for the entirety of the world. It's the most evil thing ever, personalized bioweapon. I just want to let you know, we're on the verge of capturing this guy. Really important, we're in the plane here. Or we're about to get on the plane. But I'd really love it if we could just can you get Janice from HR on the line, because at the moment I'm consigned to as the 007, but I think it would be really great if we could, swap around here. Let's give Daniel Craig back the 007 number. He's earned it. I think it'd be great. Wouldn't it be great? I think it'd be teamwork. That person, like, it just wouldn't happen. The whole thing was just so stupid. So the absurdity of it was nonsense, and then giving it back. But here's the ending. Here's what the ending of that film means. First of all, it's painted as if it's self-sacrifice, as if James Bond sacrificed himself. He didn't, because quite clearly he had no other choice. You can't call something self-sacrifice if the person has no choice. Like if a person is stuck on a plane and the engines fail and it nosedives and there's no way of recover that plane, and it crashes, you can't say he sacrificed himself. Or a plane crashes in a field, right? Instead of hitting a building, but no one was in control of the plane. You can't say, they sacrificed themselves to save others. No, the plane just was out of control. So he couldn't have escaped off that island. So he couldn't have made a choice to leave. There's no way he could have got off the island. It was too late. He was dead. So there's no actual self-sacrifice, but then they try and paint it as self-sacrifice. But here's the thing. Think about the messaging at the end of that film. James Bond this is about as subtle as a brick to the side of the head. James Bond has literally become a toxic male. He is literally toxic. And who is he toxic to? The two most important females in his life. He's toxic to his daughter and I'm pretty sure there's his wife by the end, right? His wife and his daughter. So in other words, you've got a male who is now literally a toxic male, and it is dangerous for females to be around him. So he has to die in a fiery furnace. Honestly, if this is not some demented Marxist feminist projection into a story, I don't know what is. It is so unsubtle. And honestly, I smell, and this has all the hallmarks of Phoebe Waller-Bridges' influence, because she was one of the writers on this movie. And Phoebe Waller-Bridges, this is how you take a character arc and completely ruin it in the final film. Because here's what a better writer would have done. First of all, the film would have been more tightly constrained and more focused in its storytelling. Secondly, in that final scene, the self-sacrifice would have been this. James Bond comes back from the island after saving his wife and his daughter, and then he leaves all of that life behind him and commits himself to his wife and daughter and loving and serving them as a husband and a protector and a nurturer for the rest of his days. He sacrificed his career. He sacrificed his glory, the thing that we saw in previous films he couldn't be without, which was the life of the 007. And to see him sacrifice all of that, that would have been truly heroic self-sacrifice, and it would have been an ending we go, yeah, that's beautiful. Not this toxic male, dead on an island, couldn't leave anyway. Yeah, honestly, blah. Yeah, it's as Alexander said here, woke messages that are forced and contrived for the sake of being woke actually do the opposite of their reactions. Audience don't want it. And it's more than that, they're garbage. The human instinct is we know they're not reality. We know they're not real. When you watch an overcharged superhero character, a female who's able to beat up men twice her size, you just know it's not true. It's nonsensical. It's just and instinctively you're drawn out of the mystery of what a story should be, and you sense the absurdity of it. I might save my album of the month for next month. I was going to recommend an album, but since I actually left the vinyl back in the other room, excuse me, I'm not going to do a silly thing like leave the microphone and the show open and then disembark now and go and find a vinyl record so I can share it with you. So I'll save that for next month, album of the month. So we'll talk about that then. And I'm also conscious of the time. I'd love to be able to talk about the Batman and Justice League and then have time for any of your comments that you'd love to share with me and any discussion before we wrap up for the day. Nigel Jones says your plot, Brendan, unfortunately doesn't fit the current narrative around the world. Yeah, that's an issue, right? The message, the narrative is becoming more and more detached from reality by the day. And so, unfortunately, our storytelling is really a reflection of that detachment from reality too. Okay, let's finish up then. Two things. Zack Snyder, Justice League. People have been asking me, Brendan, what did you think about Zack Snyder's Justice League? And here's what I thought. I thought it was 10 times better than Joss Whedon's cut. To be fair to Joss Whedon, his version of the film, it's got some problems. It really does. But if you actually watch that film, it's an okay little self-contained movie. It's not terrible. But there's things that clearly are issues, like the moustache thing. That was a disaster. The reshoots with Henry Cavill with his, this is my Henry Cavill impersonation. It was terrible. So that was terrible. The lighting. So Zack Snyder, obviously the costumes are designed for a different color palette, and Joss Whedon doesn't do that, and he had a brighter, much lighter, more lit color palette, and so it didn't, just that sort of everything, the costumes just didn't look right. They look fake in places, really fake, bad cosplay. And then of course Steppenwolf, the villain. Now, it makes sense to me now why Christopher Nolan, I think it was Nolan who told Zack Snyder, because they're friends, he said, look, we've just been to see the recut of your movie, the studio release. It's, don't watch it. They've butchered it. So, the stuff about it wasn't good, but it is. In saying that, it's a good. I would call it a good little Saturday afternoon, or a what would you call it? A kids action movie. It's a self-contained movie night. If you don't, you're not that invested in the lore and everything else. It's not terrible, but the Snyder cut is 10 times better, probably even more than the Joss Whedon version. Steppenwolf was a completely different character, and you needed all that space to flesh him out and to make him really make sense and to give more meaning to his presence in the story. And the look of him, gosh, the look of that character was so much better. The end of the stupid bugs, the silly bit at the end with that family trapped in the radioactive house, and you realise now watching the Snyder Cut what they did there, you realise was that they didn't know how to use all this footage they had that had been shot for a completely different story. And so they literally just shoehorn in and they film extra scenes of this family stuck in a house. It never made sense to me. Why would they still be there? And why is no one else there? And it was like, clearly, that I'd have to say this was a budget decision where they're like, what's the bare minimum we can get away with here? Okay, let's pretend it's a village that's maybe been evacuated, but for some unknown reason, one family, for no good reason, has decided to stay in what is literally a hell on earth. But no one else has. There's no one there. The place literally looks deserted. None of this really made any sort of visual or story sense to you. It just didn't feel right. Now, when you go back and watch the Snyder Cut, you realise why. You realise, okay, they were trying to tell, or Snyder was trying to tell a completely different story, and they weren't even meant to be there at all. And so here's the thing, it's a much better film. In many ways, I was thinking about this the other day, I would call the Snyder Cut more of an event rather than a movie. Because it's so long, it's a big, sprawling sort of operatic type thing. To me, it's an event rather than a movie. And it's a really well-crafted event, but that's what it is. And so I put it in a little bit of a different category. For me, I see this as the completion of a trilogy that Zack Snyder started really in conjunction with the Nolans. He started with Man of Steel. And then, of course, Batman v Superman is part 2. It's the darker moment. And then the big redemption arc where it all gets tied together is Justice League. And it's quite a phenomenal operatic thing from way to go. And I know people don't like, I know some people there's a criticism which I think is unfair actually. And that's the whole criticism that I think people picked it up from Red Letter Media about the fact that Man of Steel was all this sort of punching and smashing and action you couldn't comprehend. Oh, it's too much action. And I'm looking at this, I'm going, it's not actually that hard to comprehend at all. It's got Zack Snyder's frenetic style to it, but I think it's dishonest to say, I couldn't tell what was going on. There's very few moments where you feel out of control. It's just lots of action. And I know some people don't like that, but people then tried to level that against these films as if that's somehow a legitimate criticism of movie making. I don't think it is. To me, that's just a stylistic preference choice. And although I'm not committed to it, I don't think it's at the same time ruins a movie either. To me, it sort of made sense. To me, it makes a lot more sense. Because if you had two titans effectively battling each other, these superpowered beings who had the ability to sort of smash through buildings and not do harm and throw each other around and all the rest of it, and fly, what do you think that battle would look like? The carnage would be awful. In the old Superman movies, it's just absurd, really, when you think about it. It's this very self-contained little battle that these characters have, but it wouldn't be like that. It would be awful. It would be the last thing you'd want to be around. And so it just captures that reality of it would be awful. And here's the other thing, I think, that the idea that you could recreate the old Supermans, the old Christopher Reeve style, I think that is wishful thinking. And I'll tell you why. They tried to do this. I've talked about this at length in a previous video, so I won't relitigate it. But basically, in a nutshell, remember the Brendan Roth Superman Returns movie, Kevin Spacey playing Lex Luthor? That was an attempt to try and to do a marriage with a superhero director between really that sort of new Marvel, that new superhero style, and the older style or old school Superman. and it didn't work. Like, go and watch that film, and it doesn't work. It just didn't. So you really had to. You were either going to have to remake camp versions of the old thing and just, I don't know, make it a terrible camp film, or you were going to have to do what I think Snyder did and Nolan did, was they tried to ground it a bit more and I really think that was the only way around it. And I actually think Superman, Man of Steel is a good film. So it's this trilogy. It's completed with Justice League. I own the Justice League, so that tells you what I think about it. I don't tend to buy films if I don't think they're worthy of sticking in the collection. I own it. I like it. I consider it something unique, but, there's a couple of buts for me. One is the F-bombs in this film were frustrating. Again, I don't think they need to be there. It's sort of like, it's hard-edged, man. It's adult comic books, bruh. Too hard for you, I suppose, eh? You want to watch them kids' comics, do you? It's like, nah. No, this is just a big, pointless, sort of vacuous flex. To me, you didn't need the F-bombs. You just don't need them. And it's becoming this normative thing now, and I've often said this. I remember I got this from, I think, my grandparents, about, profanity as a refuge for the verbally insecure. They don't know what else to say, so they just drop F-bombs. And it just sort of feels like they're just doing it it's edgy, It's got an R rating, man. It's edgy. It's like, what's actually really impressive is storytellers and filmmakers who can produce a film that resonates and has got this big, darker operatic tone, but is not full of sex and profanity and gratuitous violence, because violence can absolutely serve the story and be part of the story, but gratuitous violence. And if you can do that without that, then I'll be really impressed. I think, wow, that's someone. It's like a comedian who can have you in stitches and not tell a single dirty joke, so do clean humor. And even the top comedians who trade in the guys who are on the edge, if you like, the edgy comedians, they'll tell you, look, they have the highest regard. They think the most skilled comedians are the ones who can actually enrapture an audience without, with totally clean comedy. It's because that takes a real skill to do. And so the same, I think, something is sort of true in the storytelling as well. So I own it. I like it. I consider it something unique. But here's the thing, that the F-bombs, and also on subsequent viewings, I have a little bit of mixed feelings about it. And I'll tell you what I've noticed is, on my latest viewing, it just felt a little bit like there was a darkness and a darker tone. And I don't mean that typical DC, Batman tone. This film, the Justice League, I feel should have been the film where, like Batman v Superman, the darker tone, it makes so much sense in that film, because it is serious, and it's like a dark night of the soul going on there. And I don't mean the studio cut either. Go and watch the Ultimate Edition. I own the Ultimate Edition. Thank goodness it's finally come available in my country on iTunes. But the Ultimate Edition with the half an hour of footage that the studio cut out of Zack Snyder's movie and absolutely ruined Batman v Superman. And without it, it's nowhere near as good a film. So it makes sense, though, for that to be more of a darker thing. It's confused. You've got two superheroes at war with each other, two guys grappling with identity and how they fit into the world. And it's the middle part of a trilogy, if you like. Makes sense. This one, though, it feels like that darkness should have lifted a lot more than it had. And so, but this one is really about the redemption and the completion of something good. And it just felt, I go back and watch it now, and it just feels a little bit, I don't know. It felt a little bit dark for me, which leads me into The Batman. The Batman. What did I think? Do I think it's worthy of the hype? Sorry, I kept touching my earbuds because they kept cutting out in one ear. Buy earbuds that are supposed to be really good, and this happens to you. He says. Philander Phillips says this: Hollywood doesn't monitor language because they don't care about kids. The F word doesn't belong in comic book movies outside of rated R movies, of course. I tend to agree, and I think as a parent I'm noticing this. Here's the other thing. Here's what I suspect as well is going on. You've now got, dare I say it, kidults, man boys, man babies who are making these films now, so that a lot of them haven't had a trajectory, or writing even. These are people who haven't had a typical maturity and development trajectory where you leave home, you get married, you have kids, or you get a job, you have responsibilities, and you live in the real world, and responsibility and suffering, and it challenges you to stop being a child, right? And it calls you into adulthood. And so you've got people in that space, I think, and then also people who they're older, and so it's quite normal that they would sit down and watch a film or a story that's got F-bombs or sex in it. And now what they're doing is they're importing things that they like watching into movies that are not really for their age demographic, and they're bringing their own sort of what's missing into these films. I think it's a shame. It's a tragedy, really, because there's some good stories that are going to be here. That, like, one thing we've instituted in our household recently is we've reinstituted family movie nights. So on Saturday nights we have family movie night, and we sit round together with dinner or after dinner, immediately after dinner, and we watch a movie together. And we're going back through some of the classics. For the first time ever, all of us in the family sat down, from the youngest to the oldest, mum and dad, and we watched The Sound of Music a few weeks ago together. And the youngest hadn't seen it yet. None of us had watched it together as the whole family. It was great experience, So that really, and watching classics, and we're constantly on the lookout for films that we could watch together with the whole family. And I tell you, it's getting harder and harder with what's being released to actually have that experience with new movies. Thank goodness there's such a back catalogue of good classic films out there, and even films 10 years and back that actually are suitable for that sort of experience. But anyway, so The Batman. What do I think about The Batman? For me, as I said, I have mixed bag sort of feelings about this. Let me just turn off my heater because I'm cooking like a roast chicken here. Never leave the mic. So started really cold this morning here in New Zealand. Now it's starting to warm up a bit. So for me, it's a mixed bag. There's things I really like about The Batman. There's things that I felt, okay. Ironically, and I know some people might not agree with me, but I feel Batman and Bruce Wayne, both of those characters, they actually feel a little bit underdeveloped. And I know that might seem strange, because there are other things about the characterization that I like. And I do like the arc, from vengeance to justice, but it felt a little bit underdeveloped. And what I mean by that is you get this character who goes from at the beginning, I am vengeance. Well, he's not quite that hardcore, is he? I am vengeance. That's making fun of, as we call him, or my daughters call him this. They call him Robert Pastyface. I don't. I have respect for people. They call him Robert Pastyface after Twilight. But at the very end of the movie, he's now, I am justice. And it's like a character arc, right? But the sort of thing that's missing for me is, well, two things. One is, why is Batman so angry now? It just feels like that aspect of his character isn't quite fleshed out enough. And then also, it's like, who is this Bruce Wayne character who just, it's sort of weird. The character of Bruce Wayne was always like, he was, and I think Nolan did this well as Bruce Wayne, young Bruce Wayne, the rich kid trying to find himself. He gave that a good character arc in Batman Begins. But this one, it sort of feels like we're going back to Batman, the rich kid. But yeah, like, he doesn't know he's having an identity crisis. But the rest of Gotham, it was like, this guy doesn't quite look and feel like, it's like literally when he takes the cowl off, the bat cape, the bat hood, the cowl, when he takes that off, he should become a different character, basically. He should be this sort of almost eccentric, rich playboy who no one would look at and go, oh, that guy could be Batman. Instead, it's just like, oh, it's Batman now without his costume on. It's to me that a difference was missing. And so that both characters just felt a little bit underdeveloped. So Flick221 says, hype, yes, rave reviews, no, Nolan's is much better. We'll come to that point, and I'll tell you whether I agree with you or not. Is that you, by the way, Flick, in that photo on the pistol range by the looks of things? Because I enjoy a bit of shooting myself. It's a lot harder to own pistols here in New Zealand. You have to have a particular class of license called a B class. But I have a firearms license here in New Zealand and enjoy a bit of hunting and shooting. But I've got a good friend of mine actually who owns a B class, and for sport, because you're only allowed to do it on the range here, enjoys Glock shooting. And I think he's on into the Czech Pistols now. Anyway, that's another story. But let's get back to so Nigel Jones says, look, my problem with the Batman movies is they don't move the story forward. They keep going back to how he begins. Yeah, and that's another thing too. It's sort of, I'm okay with that though. But if you just have it at the beginning, funnily enough, if you look at Zack Snyder, he had that. I think he had one of the best depictions put to scene of the death of Batman's parents. Like, artistically, stylistically, it was quite an impressive little scene. But then he quickly moves on from it. And with Nolan, you have a development that happens. Again, this one, sort of it went back to Gant. So sort of, it's like, let's dig out the treasure trove of what we know and love about Batman. Let's go back to that. Let's go back to the costume box and put on that costume again, sort of thing. But yeah, it felt a little bit underdeveloped. The Riddler, the characters here, in one sense, I'm like, oh, that's interesting what he's done there. But they also, at the same time, like the Riddler in this film, didn't really feel like the Riddler. He's definitely a serial killer and a psychopath. But in that way, to me, he felt more like the Joker. Which is kind of odd, right? Because the Riddler's not the Joker. He should be different. And he didn't really feel like he felt, and in fact, that whole plot felt like a plot that the Joker would mastermind rather than the Riddler. To me, anyway. So, yeah, look, and that character was interesting, but it didn't feel like the Riddler. I'd have to say, thank goodness, by the way, too, that they cut that Joker scene. If you haven't seen it, you can watch it on YouTube. They've released the scene subsequently. But that Joker scene, thank goodness they got rid of that. Anyway, enough said about that. Catwoman didn't quite work for me. Here's the thing about Catwoman. We'll come back to this, but for some reason, she sort of felt like whether it was the casting or the direction or maybe how she's written it. Yeah. So what he's done is he's crafted, how would I describe this? He's crafted a particular vision of Gotham and the Bat universe. And he has these characters that seem to actually fit that mold, that darker, what I would call uber realism. It's beyond hyper, it's uber realism. And they sort of fit into that world. But the Catwoman character doesn't feel like she belongs in that world. It's kind of odd. And I think part of this might be a casting choice. She doesn't have the same sort of look as the other people who are cast. And, she doesn't, like they're quirky types and they fit the quirky vision he's created there. She doesn't quite fit that. So I go back to, think about Catwoman in Christopher Nolan's film, The Dark Knight Rises. Anne Hathaway is a great casting choice and it's a well-written character and she's costumed and written in a way that absolutely feels natural to Christopher Nolan's vision, excuse me, of that story. Go back even further, where you have Michelle Pfeiffer playing the Catwoman in Tim Burton's Batman film. And the way she's written and the characterization and the casting choice is perfect. It works. She feels like she belongs there. This movie, though, something's not quite right about that character. It was sort of weird. It's like she's one person who feels she doesn't belong there. I don't know why. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it sort of felt like that for me. The Penguin with Colin Farrell, it was kind of interesting and quite cool to see him sort of overdosed and all of that makeup. And that was, you'd have to say that's quite impressive what they did with Colin Farrell. But for me, it was just okay. And I'll tell you why. It was lacking what I call the Batman edge. The Penguin, I mean, okay, Tim Burton really set the bar, but even go back further than that. The Penguin he's like a penguin. He's not just a dude who's got a nickname, the Penguin. He's called the Penguin because he bloomin' well looks like a penguin, right? He's effectively a penguin humanoid sort of hybrid. And other movies have got that right, I think. But this one, it's not quite enough. It's sort of, and as a result, I think the Batman edge is missing, if you like. And I mean the world of Batman. Because here's the thing. Remember, Christopher Nolan was accused of hyper-realism in his films. Oh, they're too real. He's not trying to make comic book movies. This guy's trying to take a comic book character and he's trying to make this comic book character into the real world, and it's just so dumb and it ruins comic stories. Remember that critique? I never got that because I think he did such a great job. I loved his films, even the weakest of the three, which is The Dark Knight Rises. I loved. It's solid. And so I never got that. I never understood that claim of hyper-realism. When people would say that to me, I'd say, go back and watch The Dark Knight and look at the Joker and tell me if you think he went for hyper-realism with that character. I don't think he did. Hyper-realism would have been the Joker literally would have been a guy who maybe wore funny-looking suits, but none of the makeup, none of the face scarring, nothing else. He would have just been like a supervillain who wore funny suits, kind of like what they've done with Penguin. So Nolan was accused of it, but he didn't actually do that. He maintained the comicness. He delivered his vision of that world, but at the same time maintained the comicness, the comic nature of this comic book universe. It was actually quite not an easy thing to do, quite an impressive feat. And so the Joker feels like a comic book character come to life. Catwoman feels like a comic book character come to life. Batman feels like a comic book character come to life. Bane clearly feels like a comic book character come to life. Ra's al Ghul and the League of Shadows feels like a comic book character come to life. I mean, even remember the criticism about Bane and his voice because he did that whole vocal distortion thing behind the mask, and the initial mix, to be fair, the audio was a little bit hinky. It's a Nolan thing, but it was on in the plane, the fire is rising, brother. And remember, you're like, what did he say? He said, what? What did he say? But it's too hot in here, and people complained about that. Like, you can't say that's hyper-realism, right? The reason is there's a guy behind a mask who's got this, what a lovely singing voice. He's got a whole different voice going on. It's comic book, exactly what you want. It's comic book characters. And so that's what I think Nolan did well. This film didn't. It was too dour and too sort of, this is what would happen if Batman lived in an emo, I don't know, dare I say it, I don't want to get political, but a hyper-democrat ruled state. Do you know what I mean? Where basically got a bunch of corrupt leaders at the top and all the taxes are being stolen and people are living in poverty and all the industries moved out of town. You just left living with a bunch of crooks. And it's like, yeah, this is probably what this world would feel like. But that's a hyper-realism, if you like, but it's not a comicness. The Batmobile, I was okay. Again, I think he made a choice. He did something unique there. To me, it felt like a hybrid cross between the Tumbler and the former Batmobiles that we've seen previously. Here's the thing, though. Ultimately, it felt more like a car that belongs in the Fast and the Furious than to Batman. It didn't, again, it's this sort of hyper-realism. It's grungy Batman, Some people I know made comparisons to Seven. I'm not sure about that. I get it. I guess they're making those comparisons because there was a serial killer in it. So that's why. Wise Mojo says thanks for the thanks for the super chat. Wise Mojo says baby lemon with pom-poms in his hands, cheerleading. Yes. It just again, it's the comicness of it that's missing. This felt like a Fast and the Furious car. The comparisons to Seven. This again, the comicness is missing because there's things like The Killing Joke and I can't remember the name of the other really great graphic novel with about the serial killer. Oh gosh, with Batman. I can't even remember it now. It's totally slipped my mind, but I can see the cover right there in my mind. But there's these sort of things have been in the comic, but this version of it felt sort of disjointed. And in some ways, it was like taking the premise of Seven and misusing that premise in a way. I don't think it did have a Seven feel to it, though, but I get why people would make that comparison. But it was pretty minimal. The thing, though, that it was I did find a little bit interesting is the darkness of the cinematography. You might see that joke meme that's been doing the rounds about, the Batman through the ages and how each frame they keep getting darker until finally there's just a pitch black square, and that's going to be the next Batman movie. To be fair, in places, it's like, gosh, this is dark. Can we do something here so I can actually see what's going on screen? And I'm not sure it was really necessary. I guess maybe it's dark, man. It's Gotham. It's a dark place. So yeah, you can portray Gotham as a dark place. Nolan did this, I think, well, without actually having a situation where you're looking at the screen going, what's going on? Who's that? Is there someone there? Or has my streaming service literally just frozen black and I'm looking at a black screen with nothing on it, or am I watching the movie? So yeah, you could have done that better. The cinematography, there was a bit of an odd choice, I thought. Here's the thing though for me. I felt you have I describe this film like this. It's a film that has I think a pretty good build up, and there's things I like about it. But then the ending felt flat. The ending was sort of weird. Someone said right back at the beginning, I can't remember who said it, if you're still in the room, put your hand up if you're still in class. Someone said right at the beginning that they felt it could have been about 45 minutes shorter. Funny, I started to feel the length of this film too. I love the start. So here's Wise Mojo says this. I love the start, but it was the same dull, dark tone through the whole film, and I was over it by the end. That's what I felt like as well. It was like, this is what you call in artistic terms dynamics. And so I'm a musician and a singer, and in songs, and this is one of the first things I was taught by much more seasoned and experienced musicians, was you need dynamics in songs, and either the way they're written or the way they're performed. If you have a song that goes like this, it goes from 0 to 100 in the first 10 seconds and then stays at 100, and there is no dynamic, no change, doesn't dip in and out of anything, it just stays the same, there's no dynamics. And pretty quickly, the emotional highs and lows are missing. There's no journey that a person goes on in that song, and it's boring, it's bleh. So one great example of dynamics in musicianship is you don't bring all of your instruments in all at once. So you save the complete orchestral arrival for the chorus, and then that way you're crescendoing. There's a dynamic there. You go from perhaps, another one is quiet volume to loud volume. So let's say during the verses, you might strip out some of your instruments and instrumentation, and then you bring it back for the choruses. Or you go quieter and then go louder during the choruses. So you need that dynamic. And the same as storytelling is true, and the same as visual. You can't just have that. You can't. You've got to have something here. And you're right, that I felt that was missing. And so the start was good, and it was interesting, and it's a great little setup, I felt. But then by the end, it was like, ugh. And then the final ending it was weird to me. So first of all, the plot didn't feel like a Riddler plot. It felt like a Joker plot, this whole idea of, I'm going to burn it all to the ground. And this anarchist, I'm not going to burn it to the ground. Let's be honest about the plagiarism here. Not so subtle plagiarism. We've gone from blowing everything up and burning it down to the Riddler flooding it all and washing it all away in a flood. I will cleanse the land. There's two cleansing agents you can call on in storytelling, right? One is fire, because it just purifies and burns away impurities. Only things that are pure can survive the heat of a fire, right? That's how precious metals are made, all that sort of stuff. And the other one is water, and it's very baptismal imagery, water. Fire tends to be that sort of the fire of testing and suffering and purgatory, if you like, purgation. And you come out the other side of it stronger, more virtuous, that sort of stuff. Baptism, there's a washing of the water. So floods, water is a symbol of cleansing as well. Baptism cleanses you from sin. That's why you see a lot of baptismal imagery in films. One of the really most beautiful and epic moments of that was actually in this film that's right behind me here. Let me see if I can get out of the way and show you the poster. The Shawshank Redemption, and there's a beautiful scene where he crawls through all that river of filth and sin in the sewers and then comes out and stands and is washed clean in the rain. It's baptismal, right? Another one is that movie about the zombies, that zombie rom-com. What was it called? Warm Bodies. Was it Warm Bodies? That is a great, with what's his name, who's a war boy from Witness Me, Valhalla. And then one of my favourite scenes was, witness me, Immortan Joe. And then he jumps onto the back of that truck, fails to deliver, and then Immortan Joe's sitting there, mediocre. Anyway, so what was that war boy's name? I can't remember the name of the character who played that war boy who became a good guy in the end. But Subject Keita says, acid cleans stuff just fine. Yeah, sure. But acid also destroys lots of good things too in the process. And in a sense, acid is a type of, that's why we say put the acid on people, right? Acid is a type of fire in itself. It's a burning test of purity. But anyway, where was I? I was talking about that War Boy. Warm Bodies, yeah, that film Warm Bodies. Remember, he's a zombie who falls in love with that girl who's a zombie hunter, and he slowly comes back to life, remember? And then at the very end, what does he do? He sacrifices himself to save her, gets shot and killed, so there's a moment of self-sacrifice, and then he falls into that pool of water, and then he rises from the pool of water, and he's alive. His life of sin and death has been cleansed and taken off him. He's now human again. So it doesn't get any clearer than that. Very baptismal imagery. Yeah, and spraying the silver paint through their mouth, that was classic. That's a great little touch, by the way, the huffing, they call it around here in New Zealand, where sadly, it's a real tragedy. People who are more impoverished, and so their drug of choice is like sniffing petrol or huffing fumes from spray cans, and I remember I used to do a bit of work with street kids, and you would see them after they'd been huffing, and they would have paint around their lips. It's just such a tragedy. And I saw a lot of good, intelligent people whose brain cells were just destroyed and wiped out by that. But that was a great moment where they go high on the silver spray paint, and then they suicide themselves for Immortan Joe, who's promised them Valhalla if they do that. But anyway, that's another story. And maybe we could talk about Mad Max another day. But yeah, the ending, as I said, where was I with the ending? The ending fell flat. You've got this whole thing, Riddler's going to flood the place, baptismal imagery. But as I said, it doesn't feel like a Riddler sort of plot to me. This felt more like a Joker plot, the anachronistic destroy the whole world, in a state of anarchy. And this thing is evil, we must destroy it. And then the ending is sort of weird. They're in a stadium and there's a flood coming and they're all just sort of ambling around, and there's no tension in it. It's really weird. Contrast that with Nolan and The Dark Knight, or The Dark Knight Rises, or Batman Begins. And every single one of those major catastrophic endings where someone is trying to destroy or do great harm to Gotham, what have you've got tension, and it's real and it's palpable. Even think about the Joker in The Dark Knight, where his plot could have been very boring in the hands of a lesser director. 2 boats, a bomb on each boat, a trigger on each. Like, in the hands of lesser directors, that would have been a very boring thing to watch play out. But Nolan infused it with the tension that he knew as a storyteller was necessary, right? This film, the ending of this, it's like, they're in a stadium and it feels like they're waiting for something to happen. The water's flooding in. It's sort of odd. Then you get that, I'm going to give a speech and I'm going to unite the people, and she gets shot because there's all these snipers suddenly up top on the top of that up the lighting rig. Yeah, it was sort of weird. It just descended into a bit of madness in the end, I felt. And then there's Batman covered in mud, and he's one of the people. Don't you get it? Don't you get it? He's a billionaire who's come down to live among the people and to help the people. He's a good man now. He was rich, and we know rich equals evil. But now what he's done is he's come down to the rest of us. He's got dirty. He's one of us. He's got amongst the mud. He's become one of the mud people with us. And now he has to toil with his hands. Not a rich kid anymore. And so, yeah, we get it. Okay, we get it. He's gritty. He's one with the city. He's rapping and rotten bad rap rhymes. So yeah, that was the sort of the ending of it. So it felt a little flat to me. And then also they have an ending after an ending. It's like, it's over now. We don't need a goodbye scene on the motorbikes. It's over now. It's over. And it was kind of weird, that motorbike scene too, where they go their separate ways. And one thing I felt was, wouldn't enough people be able to see where he went? This dude just suddenly disappears off into a vacant lot, but it's close to the city. And the next minute he's in the Batcave. So wouldn't people have seen that? Maybe it's just me, but that stuck out to me a little bit at the time. Yeah. Here's what Nigel said. Why doesn't Bruce Wayne just leave Gotham? In the real world, what would he do? He'd do what people are doing in California right now. They're looking around. California, yeah, they're going, oh my gosh, this governor doesn't know what he's doing. The place is being badly run. This is not profitable. This is not good for business. This is not good for morale. We're out of here and we're taking our business and we're going somewhere else, right? That's probably what would happen, right? So you assume Bruce Wayne would do the same. he'd be up sticks and out of there. But yeah, that's a good question. But of course you could say, well, he loves Gotham, but they tried to do that in this one, his father's legacy, but it's hard to keep that alive when you've got this, the butler is trying to tell you why you're betraying your father's legacy. It's like, well, why is he staying there for then? Yeah. Yeah, so subject Keita said, I think anyone that is willing to save everyone is somewhat a good person. They can be. This is an interesting trap. So somebody who wants to save everyone can be just someone who has a genuine altruism about them and a virtue, and they have a genuine goodness, but they're just deluded. So they don't understand yet you can't save everybody. The way to change the world is actually to go home and to change the world around you, so your immediate sphere of influence. Be the most virtuous person that you can be in every situation in your own life, and that will have changed the world for the better. Sort of, and it works out from there, as opposed to saving everyone. So they can be a good person. Then you can also have the person who says, I have figured it out. I've cracked the nut, and I believe we can build a utopia, and I'm going to do it. And so that's really, the Joker, I guess, in a sense, has got a bit of that in him. So they can be a good person. But I think you're right. There's a sense where you can understand why he might want to be a good person. But then as this film is wearing on, I'm thinking, why would this character stay in Gotham? He's like, full of darkness and evil, and it's this horrible place. And yes, the connection that he has to the city is missing a little bit. That altruistic connection, I felt. Here's what I think, and we'll go all the way back to who said this to me earlier. Flick221 said this. Hype, yes. Rave reviews, no. Nolan is much better. And I absolutely agree with you. Absolutely agree with you. I think, in my humble opinion, Nolan is still the best Batman cinematic experience you can have. He is the best, quote-unquote, Batman filmmaker that we've ever seen. Snyder had his moments, but he's not the complete picture. Nolan really got it right. There's a reason why The Dark Knight is up on my wall here. There's these films you see behind me are films that are good films, classics, and for a lot of critics would say they are like some of the best. But for me personally, they have big connection because they mean something as well. But there's a reason why that because Nolan created a phenomenal film there. And he created a Batman universe that's enjoyable, that's livable, that anybody, just about anybody at any age. Dark Knight is a little bit darker, so kids have to be a little bit older, but it can live in that space and have great entertainment. Yeah, it's basically Chicago in 2025. Who is it? I don't even live in America, and is it Lori Lightfoot who's in charge there? Who's in charge of Chicago? But I remember she's the mayor. Look, even here in little old New Zealand, little old Aotearoa here over in New Zealand, the home of Taika Waititi, who's doing his best to produce average content of late. Oh, g'day guys, it's Korg here. So little old New Zealand, we've heard what's going on in America. We've heard what's going on over there in the Republic, and we're not happy about it down here in the Antipodes. Yeah, Nigel says, as I said, Nolan kept the story going forward. Bingo. And Nolan crafted a good story, great characters, but he modernized and had his own spin on it, for sure, but he also kept the comic book nature of it. The one critique you could possibly make is that Batman in his universe is a little bit light on the detective work in his universe. He's more a gadget kind of guy. But I don't think that's a major crisis. When you think about Nolan's Batman, it's Alfred who's the detective, really, and that's okay. I'm totally fine with that. It's a minor critique. Yeah, there we go. I knew. Lori Lightfoot is the mayor of Chicago, the Shire. So Nolan, as I said, he's still the best Batman filmmaker in my opinion, and I don't think that Batman holds a candle to any of Nolan's films. In fact, any of them. It is a film that I think has some interesting ideas, that showed potential and promise, that started okay. It didn't give a complete and full ending. It's in some ways it feels like a film that was half in and half out. It didn't fully commit in either direction. Think about The Joker. The Joker, the film, or Joker, the film, which is a phenomenal film, still is in my opinion, still holds up. Great movie, great piece of social commentary, great film, well made. And I know people say, oh, yeah, it's just like drawing on the nostalgia of past films, like a Taxi Driver. And it's like, yeah, exactly, because those films are great and they're considered great for a reason. And there's a whole visual aspect to their filmmaking that really makes them great. It's not just good acting, it's a complete package. And so it would make sense that a film that pays homage to those would pay homage to those if it's trying to be great in its own right. But anyway, so Joker committed to the darker tone, and it committed to that, and not dark visually, but the darker tone, and it gets it right. I think it's a pitch perfect. This film felt like it was trying to be a companion movie to that darker Joker movie, but it didn't fully commit, and probably tried to do a little bit too much. And I think if they'd committed without the dark cinematography, imagine if it looked more like Joker, the Joker film, had that visual style, but but the story sort of committed in that same sort of way. Then I think that it would have been an interesting addition to the canon or to the lexicon, the bibliography, the bibliothèque of Batman films. But it was half in, half out. It's sort of weird in places. It feels like a teenage, like they were aiming for a teen audience or a young adult audience. It's the Pattinson factor, the Catwoman and Batman stuff in this film. And at other times, they are clearly going well beyond that audience. They're like, okay, how do we attract? Here's the list of things we need to attract to this film. We need to attract people who are angry about the current state of politics and who just are nihilistic about it. We need to attract people who are teens and young adult readers. We also want to attract people who love David Fincher's work. It's like, how do we, and also we need to attract people who perhaps have a hypersensitivity to light, and so they can't watch movies that are too bright. So it was a bizarre mix of things they sort of threw in there. Joker was amazing, eh? Philander says, in retrospect, I would have liked to have perhaps see Ben Affleck's vision in the role and helping write. Pattinson was not a disaster, but also didn't move the needle. Yeah, he was. It was one thing I did notice. And I like Pattinson. I think he gets unfair critiques. Look, he was in a terrible, cheesy, cash grab cinematic endeavor, Twilight. My eldest has read the books, and even she's like, the Mormon vampire series, she calls it. The weird, was he 60-year-old dude lusting after a young girl? It's like, it's creepy. Doesn't matter, he looks young. It's creepy. Something not right about that guy, right? And so you had that. That was sort of where he made his mark. And that, unfortunately, I think that tarred and feathered him unfairly, because every subsequent outing of those movies, same for Kirsten Stewart, actually, who's shown, by the way, if you want to watch Kirsten Stewart showing that that she's a phenomenal actor or actress, are we allowed to say that now, or is that verboten? But she's phenomenal. Is watch the new Diana film. Is it called Spencer? I should Google it right now. There's, again, great research. That's a movie that I watched recently, by the way, that I would, where's my thing gone? There it is. No, I shouldn't have done that. I've quit out of Safari totally at the wrong time when it was actually where it needed to be. That's typical, isn't it? And it was doing something else quite important. I thought, oh, it's Safari. And it was right there in front of me. Couldn't see it. But she got unfairly tarred and feathered with that whole thing as well. Let me see if I can find the thing. I think it's called Spencer from memory, that new Amazon film. And would you look at that? Yes, it is. It's called Spencer. My memory wasn't failing me. But if you want to see some really great acting from Kristen Stewart, isn't it? Then you definitely want to watch Spencer. But she's someone, it's clear, is unfairly tarred and feathered as well with the early days, the crazy heydays of Twilight, right? So is Pattinson, I think. I've seen him in other films where he showed he can act, and he's got something that I think is it still hasn't, for him, I don't think he's been quite fully exploited as an actor in potential. But in this film, yeah, he wasn't, let's be clear about this, he wasn't the right fit for this film. Like he's just not the right fit. So I agree with that. Targeted to Twilight fangirls. Franz Schubert? Oh, Nirvana and Franz. Yeah, no, that was interesting because one thing I had heard before I went into it is people said that the soundtrack's amazing. Oh, by the way, I should say, folks, that's the end of my discussion. So let's open the floor, and I'm just responding to comments now before we wrap up in the next 10 minutes or so. So chuck in your comments and your questions, and you want to disagree, that's fine. I'm all for disagreement. Let it fly in the comment section. We'll have a chat. Yeah, so Will Zamora says Nirvana and Franz Schubert. So yeah, that Nirvana clip at the beginning, that Nirvana song, and then really it does seem to have been the musical refrain, shall we say, that that was used again or referenced quite heavily in the creation of the whole soundtrack by Michael Giacchino, isn't it? Who I think has actually done some good soundtrack work. I like some of his soundtrack work. He's someone I like, modern composer. I liked his work on the new Planet of the Apes films. I think there's some good refrains in there. And yeah, then Franz Schubert. And not just Schubert, but let's be clear, it's also Beethoven. There is Moonlight Sonata is definitely, shall we say, paid homage to. In fact, there's even a track. Let me look up the soundtrack now just to prove to you that I'm not lying. There is a track on the Batman soundtrack. I've got it here somewhere. And what's it called? I was looking at this the other day. It's called Sonata in Darkness. Oh, so it's kind of like a sonata by moonlight then. And it's like you're hearing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata tones, definitely. So yeah. Yes. That was an interesting choice, right? I guess that whole darkness, the Nirvana suited it, but again, that Nirvana song, funnily enough, it felt like that should have come later in the film. To me, that's a dynamic moment. It's like, it's a moment where you build and build and build and build into something very emotive. What happens when you put it at the beginning is it's emotive, but it's setting a tone now, which is a little bit different. And I know that might seem strange, but maybe this difference is subtle. But what it's doing is it's setting a tone for the rest of the film, an emotional tone, as opposed to you have a film that is well written and then there's a genuine moment of sadness or darkness and you use that song there. Do you see what I mean? It's like it's complementing what's going on. It was, yeah. I mean, maybe I'm being too nitpicky there. Philander says this, Pattinson, can act. I loved Water for Elephants. Yeah, he's a guy who's got some acting chops. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Going back to your point too earlier about Ben Affleck, would you like to see Ben Affleck in the role? Yeah, I don't know. In some ways, he's attached to that Snyder universe. It'd be interesting to see under a different vision what he'd be like. Here's the thing about Affleck, funnily enough. Affleck, I think, leans really strongly on the Bruce Wayne side of it. As a Bruce Wayne, and then he sort of jumps into the suit and just becomes a darker character. But his Bruce Wayne, I thought, was good. There was something believable about that guy as a sort of like a snooty billionaire type that worked really, really well. Before I come back to you, Castra, and thank you, by the way, for everyone who's been chucking in the hot chats. You guys are awesome. Don't forget, I'm going to answer some questions here in a second. Don't forget that we're going to do these Left Foot Lives now once a month. So these sort of talking about media, TV, music. I promise next month we'll do the album of the month that I didn't do this time because I left the vinyl in the other room. But we'll do the album of the month. We'll talk about movies, TV, stuff like that. So these Left Foot Lives will be the first Friday of every month. If you're in another country, it might be the first Thursday night of every month. So we'll be back at the start of June with another one of these. And of course, we've got the Monday Night Live show, which is sort of more politics and culture stuff as well, if you're into that. That's the panel with the discussion panel, myself and Elliot O'Keefe and Simon O'Connor, who's an MP in our parliament here. That happens monthly as well, live stream to this channel, among others. But yeah, those who've given super chats, you're awesome. And don't forget, you can support on PayPal and Coffee. There's links for those in today's show. If you want to leave a one-off contribution, you can do it through Coffee or PayPal, or you can become a patron. $5 or more per month. You'll get access to the Dispatches podcast on cultural issues every week, free, exclusive episode for our patrons every single week. And they're pretty lengthy. They're about 2.5 hours long, those patrons-only Dispatches podcasts. Like this week's episode of the Dispatches this Monday was 2.5 hours long. We talked a bit about Elon Musk buying Twitter, actually. Anyway, so let me get back to your questions before we just wrap this up. So Nigel says, is there much in the news across the ditch in regards to the Australian election? Yeah, we're getting a bit of coverage. I'm following it a bit more with interest because I'm a bit of a what we call here in New Zealand a political tragic, bit of a political train spotter. And I think there's implications. So I like to watch the Western nations, how they're going, even if only just a summary, but a little bit more in depth than what we'd normally get here in New Zealand. But we're seeing a bit of coverage of it. We're not seeing all of the glorious hot takes and in-depth stuff that I'm sure you're dealing with. I hear it's quite interesting. It's getting quite messy. My prediction is it's going to be a very messy outcome because I feel like neither party really represents the people in a way that has gained majority respect. And it's almost, I sense there's going to be a lot of vote splitting around the country, and maybe even the smaller parties might pick up a bit. I don't know. Anyway, we'll see what happens. Castro says, hot take, Batman Begins is the best Batman film. What do others think? I actually think that I like Batman Begins. I think it's a great film, and I think it really showed what was possible, and in some ways, unfortunately, others took it and yeah, I mean, I think Nolan doesn't get enough credit, I don't think, for... You can talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe all you want, but I think Nolan proved that you could actually produce comic book films that would be wildly popular and that were different from what comic book films had been before. They weren't just children's outings. And Nolan showed that. And Nolan showed you could make a quality, like a level of film that really would stand on its own merits as a film. Like if Batman had never been invented as a comic book and Nolan had written that movie with those characters and we'd never heard of them before, that film would be, and that trilogy, in fact, would be just like, imagine, it'd be even more phenomenal than what it is for the creative aspect of it. But yeah, it stands the test of time, right? It's good filmmaking. And Marvel, despite where they ended up with Infinity Wars and Endgame, this sort of big crescendo and some good films along the way and quite an impressive sort of tying of the bow around it all, Nolan, I think, really, we have to give him credit because the early days of Marvel, it was experimenting. You could see it was, and some of the films were average. They weren't flash. They didn't hit their stride straight away. It wasn't like, along comes Iron Man and they're off racing. You know, they replaced Hulk at one point, and it takes a while for them to come right. And I think I really do think you'd have to say that Nolan, I think he showed the studio system and the people who wanted to create that sort of film that there definitely was merit in this, and there was still mileage. Comic book films weren't done and dusted. They weren't just kiddie stuff. They weren't just campy stuff. You could actually make good comic book movies. Sorry, microphone in the face there. But as for the hot take, is Batman Begins the best Batman film? No, I don't think it is. It's close second, but I think The Dark Knight is the better film. And I'm not just saying that out of some sort of misplaced sentimentality about the death of Heath Ledger. I just think you've got this, everything came together well in that film. The villain, I think, is a big factor, for sure, but the plot is impressive. The way he uses an ensemble cast of characters and puts them together and tells a story that's coherent and moves and is meaningful and never feels cumbersome or slow. The tension is constantly in that movie, right from the start, right to the end. The Joker is a great villain. I mean, look, no offense to Ra's al Ghul in the League of Shadows, or who was the other one? Carmine Falcone. They weren't, like, the League of Shadows was pretty good, but it wasn't the level of villain that the Joker is to Batman, the nemesis factor, and it didn't have that. It didn't quite have that factor. that bit was, whereas you go to that next level in the villainy, if you like, in The Dark Knight, and I think that helps to make it an even better story. And to be fair, I think although it's not as good and it does get critiqued, and rightly so, The Dark Knight Rises, I think is actually, I don't know if you can hear that plane flying around over the top. We're in a more rural area, so we get planes landing. But I think The Dark Knight Rises is actually is a really good film in its own right, and did what I think you had to do in a sense as a follow-up to the previous film. It could have been really bad, and it wasn't. It was they like basically, I think other directors and writers might have run out of ideas by the time they got to The Dark Knight Rises, but he had a shot at a few things, and the villain was very, very good, very serviceable. I thought Bane was a great villain. I thought that whole concept was good. It was different enough too from it's funny, it ratchets up even what Joker was doing. So Joker's just trying to destroy the system and anarchy. With Bane, you get the sense that he's more of a utopianist. He's trying to build a new world. And the tension, the criminality of it ratchets up. As a villain, he holds his own in the pantheon of Batman villains and in the Nolan universe as well. So The Dark Knight Rises, I think, is despite the fact it's the weakest of the three, but it is still, I think, a great film. But for me, The Dark Knight is the best of those films, and close second is Batman Begins, and then third, and not by a long shot, but third is The Dark Knight Rises. I think, and I might do a future episode on this where we talk about Nolan's films, because someone said to me, Nigel says, cheers, Brendo, good to have the chats back. Yeah, no, good. And thank you to everyone who's given in the super chats. You guys are awesome. And good to be back on Livestream Hero. So where are we? Philander says, hey, LFM, you can call me Brendan if you like. My friends and Livestream compadres call me Brendan. Hal FM, before you go, please rate your Jokers if possible. Before I rate your Jokers, I will do that in just a second before we wrap up. But we're going to have, I think in a future episode I might talk about the Nolan films, because I think Nolan is actually a bit of a prophet. And what I mean by that is I've noticed now that there are things in his films that really do speak in a very deep and at times subtle way that it's often why they're missed. There's a bit of nuance there, but he speaks to the philosophical and cultural decline in the West. And often people miss it. I know people criticised, I won't get into it now, but people criticised, I was going to say Supernova, but it's not Supernova, it's Interstellar. People criticised Interstellar and, it was a stupid plot about love will save the world. Blah, blah. I was like, you didn't get it, did you? You missed the point of what he was saying. So we'll talk about what I think he was saying. A really important message, actually, in that film. The same is true in Tenet. Tenet is actually, if you haven't watched my video on that, go and watch my video on that, where I unpack what's really, I think, is going on in that film. But also in The Dark Knight Rises. No, The Dark Knight Rises? Yeah, it is The Dark Knight Rises. Remember they have those kangaroo courts, where they put people on trial. And it's the elite versus the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat who are putting people on. It's very interesting. He got this cultural Marxism writ large all over that. And it's a very brief, subtle thing that I think a lot of people miss. So, yeah, we might talk about that in a future episode about Nolan and his filmmaking. I'd agree with that, Castro. Castro says, I really appreciate that Nolan made 3 very different movies, but they still felt coherent. That is so, so true. Now, Philander Phillips says, hey, LFM, before you go, can you please rate your Jokers if possible? Well, for me, there's really only one Joker, and that's Jack Nicholson. No, that's not true. Jack Nicholson was amazing, I think, as the Joker. He still stands out as something special about those movies, those Tim Burton films. It is Jack Nicholson, right, who really, he made those films in a way that there's just something about it. I don't know what. Maybe I have to spend more time thinking about it, but he did something there that was really cool. That was when I was a bit younger, when I was a kid. I think for me, though, if I'd rate my Jokers now, I'd probably have to give it to that deleted Joker scene from The Batman. No, I'm just kidding. Everyone's like, oh, what? Having heart attacks in the background. No, I definitely wouldn't give it to that Joker. That guy, he honestly, He looked like that Joker in that deleted scene looked like he fell out of the ugly tree and hit every branch on the way down. That was not, I don't know what that was. It was just something else. But that Joker's a no for me. So what about then we look at Jared Leto. Shut up, Jared. No, that's a no from me. I think Jared tried too hard, I think. It's almost, you almost felt like he was trying too hard to channel Heath Ledger, but in his own style, and I'm going to make it really weird. No, it's like Marilyn Manson comes to town. No, there was a no from me. So I put those down the bottom of the pile. So really, then you're left with what? You're left with Joaquin Phoenix's Joker. You're left with Jack Nicholson, and you're left with who are we left with? Who's the other one I'm missing? Heath Ledger. Now, I'm not going to go back into the old Batman series with Adam West and the Bat-Watusi. If you don't know what the Bat-Watusi is, go and Google Bat-Watusi and watch the most cringeworthy dad dance that you'll ever hear. By the way, I'll finish this episode on an awesome dad joke that my kids have been cringing at lately. Remind me to do that before we finish. But in just a second. So who am I left with in my sort of top three? I'm left with then, Heath Ledger. I'm left with Jack Nicholson, and I'm left with with Joaquin Phoenix. I think I'd have to give it to Heath Ledger. But to me, all three are on a par. And I'll tell you what, because they're all very different things that are going on there. So Heath Ledger has got this, he's just immersed in this character that he gets the sort of the nihilistic, anarchistic menace of the Joker. He lands that perfectly, I think. Now, he really does. And the whole time you're on, that guy's on screen and you're around him, you're watching him because you're not sure what madness is going to ensue. You know, he's not your typical villain. The guy really feels mad. And there's all these quirky turns of phrase and little mannerisms and things that he just gave to that character. Remember that scene where they're at the party with the canapes and the champagne? He gets that glass and tips it over his head, pours it out. And, it was just perfect. There was something there that was just complete. A complete, total bodily and vocalized character that he was just immersed in the costume and everything. And, the way, this voice and the sort of stuff that he had going on, which would make sense with his mouth and the, why so serious, and he would turn on a dime and then next minute he'd be lecturing you like a pompous, arrogant nihilist. Remember that lecture he gives to Batman? And, the thing is, it's got that sort of stuff going on. It's just, I really love that. So that's one thing. But then you go to Jack Nicholson's Joker, and Jack Nicholson, what's he doing? Jack Nicholson is doing more of a campy comic book Joker, and it's perfect. And he was perfect casting by the way. It's Jack Nicholson. It had it felt like an integration between the Joker and Jack Nicholson. And it worked. It was great casting, and he was doing the campy, comic-y, I'm here, boys, sort of thing. He really did. He got that down perfect, and there was also a bit of menace in it as well. And again, I like perhaps the stylization and makeup and stuff was good, but it's very different to what Heath Ledger is doing. Then, of course, we have Joaquin Phoenix in Joker. Now, is he the real Joker? We don't know for certain. I want to believe that he is, but I know that it's likely that it's going to be someone else that the Joker has tricked into. I suspect it will be anyway. In a future movie, they're talking about possibly making another film, and they might reveal that he wasn't really the Joker. I hope they don't, because I think it would have been a great, great little story to have within that universe, and it was so well told. I feel the gloss would be taken off it a little bit if he's not really the Joker, because of the fulfilling way he comes into that character, his character arc from a broken, mentally ill man into this villain. It's just felt so perfect and fulfilled. And I felt it'd be sort of robbing a little bit of something if it turns out it's not really the Joker. It was like, why'd you do all that build up that would be Joker build up for a guy who's not the Joker? I think for me, and I'm not. Look, can you go past the voice of Mark Hamill? Probably not. Although Hamill's been a bit funny on Twitter lately, you can't fault his abilities, and one of them is voiceover acting is pretty good, and his voice in the animated series was pretty good, I thought. However, for me, then I think the thing about Joaquin Phoenix too is he's playing a Joker that is coming into his character and is definitely this sort of grounded, mentally unwell person. There's something very complete about. And the way he comes into that character, Murray, it's So for me though, I think probably Heath Ledger is the top. Heath Ledger's up the top. So Philander, you've rated yours. You've said Heath Ledger's number one, so we're in agreement about that. Where we're in disagreement is our second and third. I think second and third is a tie between Nicholson and Joaquin Phoenix. They're all doing different things though, but probably they got all three could hold up on their own. It's been pretty good. So where were you? You said first of all was Heath Ledger, then Casario Romero, Jack Nicholson. You must give respect to the first. Yeah, that's true. I would agree with that. Yeah, he's a memorable Joker. He's very much the campy kids character though, right? And I watched that cartoon as a kid. I watched the movies when it was like, hey, the Batman movie's on. And back in my day, that wasn't today. If I said to you the Batman movie's on and I played you that movie, you'd go, what is this? But back in my day, we were like, cool. And school holidays would come around. Batman's on at midday. Yay. Grey bat suit doing the Batwatusi. But yeah, you're right. You got to give credit to the originals. Let's have a couple more comments before we wrap up this episode. I'll give you a good dad joke on the way out. Chronologic says, no, I'm not feeling the Seven style David Fincher motifs. Yeah, okay. I think what you've got is a serial killer. He's killing to a pattern. He's killing, based on people's sins. And he's killing to try and lure someone to this final big sort of manic plot at the end where opens up the box. What's in the box? What's in the box? It's not quite that, but so I get it. I get that. I see that. And I think the darker style. Fincher's not, it's funny. Go and watch The Zodiac. That's a phenomenal David Fincher film. And what The Zodiac does is this film was dark. Like Zodiac is dark in tone, but not dark in visual. You can see what's going on. This film was just dark. I think people thought, it's like David Fincher because it's naturalistic lighting. Yeah, they didn't turn any light on. It was just the natural light out of the sky. Because in some scenes, man, it was dark. Chrono says the first Tim Burton Batman is fantastic on 4K. Yeah, it is. It's pretty good. You're right on 4K. Thanks for the super chat, 2012 HTCME. Great to see you live, Brendan. My main channel, Hacky Smack, won't super. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, mate. That's no good. So it's good to have you with us, Happy Smack, though. Anyway, where was I? Again, thank you for the super chats, guys. They're really awesome. We'll just wrap up, but I'll tell you a dad joke, my latest dad joke in just a second. We'll be back, by the way, for those who want to come back. Before I tell you when we're going to be back, don't forget, once a month, first Friday or Thursday night of the month, if you're in another country, we'll be doing these Left Foot Lives. So please spread the word, tell everyone we're back. We're back in business, baby. It's going to be grand. So yeah, tell everyone to get back. And this show, we're going to be talking about movies and TV, and we're going to do a vinyl or a record of the month. I'm going to bring out my vinyls, but you could listen to on streaming if you want to, or on CD, it doesn't matter, but a record that I think is a record of the month, and just, general amusements, wholesome amusements, a live stream, a community of wholesome amusements. That's what we'll be all about. It'll be a bit longer in length, a bit more substance to them once a month. I want to get back into you guys have been an awesome, I'm honest, as I'm getting older, I'm a lot more appreciative of this, but you've been an awesome fan base, basically, the diehards and the subscribers and the people who keep sending me really kind and I think very generous comments about the content that you've enjoyed. And a lot of it is that I haven't made an original video content on this channel, like about movies or a commentary piece for quite some time. I think, was it last year was the last one? But you've been sort of very kind and gracious, and people saying, where are you? We want you back. You're too kind. You're too kind. As I say to people, whenever I speak in public, anything good that comes out of my mouth or out of my hands, anything that I create that's good, all glory and credit goes to God. And I mean it. That's not an Oscars speech. I really mean it. I'm a firm believer. And he's given me every good gift I need to produce stuff. So if it's good, Thank him. All the rubbish, that's my fault. So all the rubbish is on me. That's how I'm trying to live my life. But as I'm getting older, I really appreciate the kindness of people who take enjoyment from some of the stuff, and it's great to be back and to be able to be back with you in this way. And long may it continue. As I said, that's my pledge. Once a month, we'll be back for these Left Foot Lives. If you want to support what we're doing, thank you to the Super Chats. There's a PayPal link and a coffee link in today's video description. You can leave one-off donations there, contributions if you like this content. Or if you want to become a regular patron, you can do that at Left Foot Media. So patreon.com/Left Foot Media. There's a link in the show notes again for today in the video description. And if you become a $5 or more per month patron, then you get a free episode of the Dispatches podcast, my podcast that I produce every single week. And that is more cultural and political issues from a sort of Judeo-Christian natural law perspective. So not everybody's going to be interested in that, but it's there and it's a freebie and it's all part of the deal. Right, we'll be back on the 3rd of June. But before I go, I promised you a dad joke, and I think you're all hanging in for it. Maybe we'd have to have a monthly dad joke. Let me tell you this joke. My kids are like, I just have to say a certain phrase out of this joke now, and my kids go, "Oh, Dad." Here's the joke. So I was in the sorry, it's a terrible start to a joke, isn't it? Glass of water. I was in the forest recently on a hunting trip, and sadly I stumbled across a skull. So some human remains. And I stumbled across a skull in the forest, and I think, what do? I'm a bit more rural, a bit out in the woods. What do I do? So I find a spot where I've got some coverage. I call it's not 911 here, 111 number here. And I say, look, I found some human remains. You better send somebody here. And so they asked me, look, if you could just stay and wait while we come. So I'm sitting there, I'm waiting in this forest. I'm sitting on this blooming stump. And I'm looking at the skull, and all I can see is the skull. And I think to myself, who is this person? What a great tragedy. How did they live their lives? Who were they? Who were their family? What did they do for a job? What happened in their life that they arrived in this forest and they met their final end in this forest? Who was this person? And why the heck do they have deer horns? Now, my kids absolutely hate that joke now. And all I have to say is if they're getting off track in a conversation around the dinner table, I'll just drop in there. I'll say, and why the heck do they have deer horns? And they go, Dad. So yeah, that's my dad joke. Yeah. Oh, okay, sorry. So someone says to me the one-off payment link doesn't work. Okay, is that for PayPal? I'm sorry, I've had this issue with YouTube in the past. I don't know why they stopped working. If you go to my YouTube homepage, at the very top on the right, so point in the right direction to where you'll see it, there is a PayPal link. You can't miss it. It's a link. It's a button you can click on for PayPal. That's on the main homepage of my YouTube channel. You can find it there. Is the coffee link not working either? You can use the coffee link if you want to. You can make a one-off payment with coffee, and it goes through PayPal as well. So I think that one should be working. I'll check that out. I don't know what's going on. I'm glad you enjoyed the joke. It is a great deer joke. Who was this person? Why did they have deer horns? Anyway, for those who didn't get the joke, it's not a person. It was a deer. Yeah, get it? Yeah. Funny. Yeah. Well, on that happy note, having to explain his own jokes, I'm out of here. Thank you guys for tuning in, those who tuned in live. Thank you those who are going to watch this later. It is great. We're back, baby. And it is great to be back. Once a month, we'll be back with these Left Foot Lives. And I hope to see you on future episodes or catch up with you after you've watched them and shared your comments and everything else. You guys are awesome. Thank you to patrons, supporters, the super chats today. I really am overwhelmed. It's just great to have this awesome bunch of people who find some merit in the artistic creation that I'm putting out into the world. And thank you. You've made an old man happy. Very happy. Yes, and no, it's not a coffee link to buy myself a coffee. It's literally KOFI as in coffee, but as in shout him a coffee, give him a little donation. So yeah, that's what that means. Anyway, on that happy note, I think I am out of here. He says I'm looking for my end screen desperately. You guys have been awesome. See you next time on Left Foot Live, Friday the 3rd of June. We will be back, baby, and bigger than ever. See you then.